Chapter 1245. The Peach Garden officially announced that Peach Girl of the 4th rank and Chinyu of the 9th rank fell in love with each other and would become Dao companions. Although the date of the ceremony had not been set, the news was like a boulder that stirred up waves. Their focus was still different. The sages thought that the newly promoted Saint Slayer Chinyu's aptitude was indeed amazing. He was recognized by the yardmaster and married to Peach Girl. After making this decision, the yardmaster was probably going to train Chinyu as her future successor. However, they couldn't understand why the true Nirvana saint would make such a decision in a hurry. After all, Chinyu had just made a name for himself and had only been in the Peach Garden for a short time. Wasn't he afraid that there would be problems? The yardmaster was not someone who would be careless and easily tricked. On the other hand, the cultivators felt sour, but most of them were impressed. They thought to themselves that such an awesome person was indeed beyond their imagination. That was Peach Girl. Haoyang was the top beauty and the talented cultivators who pursued her. The sum of them could fill up the entire East Sea, but they had never heard of anyone who could get close to her. Chinyu had only been in the Peach Garden for a short time, but he had already captured Peach Girl's heart. From then on, he rose to the heavens in a single step. His status was so precious that few could compare with him in the entire Sage Dao circle. On this day, the East Sea Dragon Sage smashed his cup and cursed in the Dragon Palace. The son-in-law he had chosen had been snatched away by that shameless Peach Girl. Dragon Girl locked herself in her room and wrote the words "Forever lost my love" with a sorrowful expression as she wept silently. As for revenge, forget it. Even if I lost love, I still have my life. I can't make it difficult for me to live. Chinyu, who was the center of the conversation, knew nothing about all this. But he was not stupid. He could guess it just by thinking about it. Including the Saint Slayer incident, he was really famous this time. But at the same time, there must be many people who wanted to kill him. For example, Peach Girl's numerous suitors. And of course, West Mountain. Peach Girl didn't die, which was Chinyu's biggest mistake. Chinyu didn't know and didn't care what would happen between the Scholar Sage and the Yard Master. But he was clear that if there was a chance, the Scholar Sage would not hesitate to crush him into pieces. The thought of being targeted by a true Nirvana saint who could go head-to-head with the Yard Master sent chills down his spine. Fortunately, now that he had become a member of the 4.5-man team in the Peach Garden, he believed that the Garden Master would do her best to ensure his safety. Eldest senior brother went into seclusion and asked Taishan to deliver a congratulatory gift. 6th senior brother, Tu Xing, came with Taishan and they were inseparable as usual. After presenting their gifts, the 2 senior brothers did not stay for long. After saying a few meaningless greetings, such as little junior brother needs to recuperate well, they took their leave at the same time. Chinyu thought it was a bit strange. His 2 senior apprentice brothers were acting very cautious. But before he could think further, 7th senior apprentice sister arrived. Behind him was Lei Xiaoyu, who had her head lowered and her eyes drooped in fear. It seemed like these people in the Peach Garden had arranged a visit today. Greetings, 7th senior apprentice sister, 8th senior apprentice sister. Chinyu coughed and bowed. Lei Xiaoyu had an uncomfortable expression. As expected, 7th senior apprentice sister had changed into a beautiful and alluring face. Her figure was enchanting and alluring, and she smiled. Little junior apprentice brother, I take back what I said before. In the future, I will have to rely on you to protect me in this Peach Garden. As she finished speaking, she winked at Chinyu. Chinyu forced a smile. 7th senior apprentice sister is too serious. I will have to rely on you in the future. The garden master was certainly the clearest about the people in the Peach Garden. Since she placed 7th senior apprentice sister on the same level as eldest senior apprentice brother and 2nd senior apprentice brother, then she must be extremely strong. Towards such an unfathomable senior apprentice sister who changed faces every day, he didn't dare to provoke her in the slightest. 7th senior apprentice sister smiled again and again. Little junior apprentice brother really knows how to talk. I like you like this. This was not easy to respond to. Lei Xiaoyu helped Qin Yu out of this awkward situation. She earnestly said, "Little junior apprentice brother, in the future when you are with senior apprentice sister Peach Maiden, you must cultivate hard and live a good life." Qin Yu felt that there was a hidden meaning in this girl's words. Seventh senior apprentice sister glanced at Lei Xiaoyu, the smile on her face even wider. Of the 9 disciples of Peach Blossom Garden, besides the 2 involved parties, only 3rd senior apprentice brother White Phoenix didn't say anything. 7th senior apprentice sister's eyes flashed. She suddenly said, "3rd senior apprentice brother has gone into seclusion. He might be able to make a breakthrough in his bottleneck. I hope that little junior apprentice brother doesn't mind." Qin Yu smiled and nodded. If 3rd senior apprentice brother can smoothly make a breakthrough, that would be for the best. I would be overjoyed, so how could I be so petty? 7th senior apprentice, sister, looked at Qin Yu several times and nodded. I knew that my little junior apprentice brother was a sensible person. All right, that's all for today. I have other matters to attend to, so I'll be leaving first. She turned her head and said, 80, come with big sister. Lei Xiaoyu was 100 times unwilling. She had a bitter expression on her face, but she didn't dare to say anything to refuse her. He glanced at Qin Yu, but after being ignored, he gnashed his teeth and gloomily nodded and left. Closing the courtyard doors, Qin Yu lightly humphed. He thought that this little girl was quite bold. She actually dared to tease him. Although he didn't know why 7th senior apprentice sister had pulled Lei Xiaoyu over, he knew that there wouldn't be any danger. At most, she would suffer a bit. This would be a small lesson to her. After the disciples of the Peach Garden arrived, it was time for the cultivators of the Peach Garden to come from all directions. Since the garden master had announced the good news, they naturally had to express their gratitude, and they had to express it in a big way. Everyone here was smart. The garden master only had a single daughter, and she had always treated her like a treasure. How could they not understand why she had promised her to Mr. Ninth? This was the same as choosing a future for the Peach Garden. Then what else was there to say? They hurried to give gifts to curry favor, and they had to be generous gifts in order to leave a good impression in Mr. Ninth's heart. According to the garden master's wishes, Qin Yu had to personally entertain this group of people while Peach Blossom was recuperating, and at the same time familiarize himself with them. He was all smiles for a long time, but his face felt stiff. It was fine if there were harvests, but all the treasures that had piled up into a mountain had all been sent into the Peach Garden storehouse. The garden master had said that these were gifts to congratulate him, and that they could only be given to him after the wedding. Qin Yu bitterly smiled. Like hell I'll believe you. You rotten old man, you're so evil. How can you spit out what you've already eaten? Besides, everyone knew that it was a problem whether or not he would show up on the day of the wedding. Even if he did show up, it would just be a pretense. The treasures flowed through his hands like flowing water, and then disappeared without a trace. This was simply torture. Qin Yu felt that it was too difficult for him. Fortunately, this situation did not last for too long. Qin Yu received a summon from the garden master, and once again came to the small courtyard where the garden master lived. Greetings, honorable master. The garden master was drinking tea. She glanced at him. You've been cursing me in your heart for the past few days, haven't you? Qin Yu's forehead instantly broke out in a cold sweat. Did the Saint Path have such an ability? He even said that the garden master had cultivated a method similar to his mind-reading skill. This disciple is terrified. This disciple wouldn't dare. Nonsense. As long as he was not caught on the spot, he would definitely not admit to it. No, even if he was caught, he would have to pretend that he had lost his mind or something, and deny it. The garden master snorted. If you really want to marry Peach Blossom, I'll give you the treasures immediately. I'll also give you access to the storehouse. You can kill and take whatever you want. Yu lowered his head and said nothing. The yard master secretly scolded Meng Qi for not taking the bait. But there would be plenty of time in the future. She was not in a hurry. She put down the teacup and said, I called you here today to confirm your cultivation path so that I can prepare you in advance. Yu bowed. Thank you, honorable master. The garden master said, Cut the crap. You're still in the divine realm. Summon your divine seal. I'll help you fix it and ensure that you can break through to the original God realm as soon as possible. There was a hint of disdain on her face. The divine realm. This realm was too low. Although his strength was not weak, it was still shameful to say it out loud. As the dignified son-in-law of the Peach Blossom Garden, how could he only be in the divine realm? He should at least be at the original God realm. Of course, the most important reason was that only those who had reached the original God realm were qualified to search for that sea. After all, he could not even find the sea. How could he set a goal to break through to the sovereign realm? If not, the garden master actually did not want her to interfere with Yu's cultivation too much. He had taken the wrong path and was trapped at the peak of the Saint Realm. The great path ahead of him had been cut off, and he could not turn back. He was destined to stop here for the rest of his life. Those who had taken the wrong path were not qualified to guide someone who had set his goal to become a sovereign. Cough, cough. Moreover, the cost of this matter was too great. Even if it was a true saint of the other shore, it was not easy to forcefully fix the flaws of another cultivator's divine seal. If the target was not Yu, and this boy was too important, the garden master would not have helped him. That was why he was in a bad mood today. It should be known that he, the dignified master of the Peach Blossom Spring, had never suffered a loss for anyone in his life except for his own daughter. Yu felt that ever since the garden master had taken the mysterious pill, she had become a different person. She was much more real and had lost her image. She was a true saint. She should at least maintain her identity and not be too direct. Moreover, it was just a pill. Was she really that confident in its effect? As he silently ridiculed her, his mind moved. The divine seal suddenly condensed and floated above his head. He bowed. Honorable master, please guide me. In the past, in order to smoothly enter the myriad soul path, Yu had obtained the divine concentration seal from the stone pagoda and forcefully condensed it into the divine path. Although the process was tortuous, the final result could be considered good. Yu had smoothly stepped into the divine realm, and there was nothing wrong with him afterwards. However, this divine seal was not a natural product. Yu was uncertain, but he still saw this as the best opportunity. The garden master was a dignified, true saint of the other shore. Her vision was high and her methods were exquisite. It was not something he could imagine. If there was really a problem with the divine seal, the garden master would definitely be able to discover it. She would then help him eliminate the hidden dangers ahead of time and solidify his foundation for breaking into the original God realm. Time passed slowly. Yu waited and waited, but the garden master's voice didn't come. He couldn't help but frown inwardly. He was a little flustered. Was the problem very serious? Nonsense. If it wasn't very complicated and thorny, why would a dignified, true saint remain silent for so long? That damned stone pagoda. I knew it was unreliable. This kind of thing that came to me on its own and shamelessly took the initiative to be its master was really unreliable. In the dark nothingness, a certain stone pagoda burst into tears as it sensed Yu's thoughts. It thought, "Have you forgotten who forced me to obtain the divine seal, self-condensation seal? Moreover, do you know the level of your divine seal? Have you ever asked me about it since then? Without any investigation or verification, you labeled me as unreliable. I feel so bitter in my heart." But at this time, no matter how bitter it was, it could only endure it. The garden master was investigating the divine seal, and it had no choice but to run into her hands. But Yu, I'll remember this. When I have the chance to make a comeback, I'll definitely make you pay 100-fold. Aha! There was no movement. There was still no movement. Qin Yu took a deep breath, gritted his teeth, and raised his head with difficulty. Then he saw the incomparably gloomy face of the garden master. Qin Yu's divine seal was reflected in her eyes. Countless, incomparably complex nomological marks were intertwined with each other, and there were also thousands of lines that hung down like curtains. They shone brightly and dazzlingly. Well, it was hard to say anything else, but judging from its appearance, this divine seal was really not bad. Chapter 1246. However, for a divine seal, appearance was not the most important thing. The key was its practicality. Seeing the yard master staring at the divine seal with a solemn expression, Qin Yu's heart became heavier. He asked cautiously, "Master, is there a big problem?" The yard master blinked and looked down. "This divine seal of yours, how did you get it?" Sure enough, there was a problem. With the yard master's experience, she instantly discovered that something was wrong. The stone tower. Forget it. Let's not talk about it first. If there really was a problem, it would be useless to demolish it now. Qin Yu took a deep breath. In my early years, I hurriedly broke through to the divine realm in order to enter the myriad soul path. However, the condensation of the divine seal was not smooth, so I had to interfere on my own. The yard master's eyes moved. You mean this divine seal was condensed by you? Qin Yu nodded. And it was done in a hurry. Qin Yu nodded again. How long did it take? Qin Yu blinked. The yard master was expressionless. Let me ask you, how long did it take you to condense this divine seal? 7 days. The yard master fell silent. Qin Yu licked the corner of his mouth. Master, no matter what the problem is, just tell me the truth. I can bear it. Looking at the boy's face of death, the corner of the yard master's mouth twitched. She was sure that he really didn't know and didn't want to make fun of her. He knew that this lad was too cunning. There was no way he would do something so unreliable and courting death by playing with fire. In other words, it was all luck. As an old fellow who had already lived through 3 cycles of the replacement of the divine path, the term experienced and knowledgeable was certainly the most appropriate to describe the yard master. The yard master certainly knew about the divine concentration seal, which had been popular for a period of time many years ago. Not only did she know about it, but she also collected many secret techniques of the divine concentration seal in order to verify it and find some inspiration to break through the limits of cultivation. After careful study, she found that this thing sounded very lofty. It seemed that a long time ago there was a slogan, "My fate is in my own hands, not in the hands of the heavens," which made the blood of a group of cultivators boil. However, 99% of those who shouted this phrase back then became dregs. They weren't killed by others, but killed themselves. After ascertaining that the level of danger was too high and the success rate was frighteningly low, it was basically playing with fire and getting burned. The yard master decisively stopped. However, saints were extraordinary after all. They had studied it for a period of time and could be said to be experts in the spirit concentration seal. That was why he was lost in thought for a long time as he stared at this divine seal that contained profound laws and profound mysteries. In just 7 days, and he was still a novice, he managed to condense this divine seal in such a hurry. If she wasn't certain that Qin Yu wouldn't dare to lie to her and that the divine seal was right in front of her, the yard master would definitely strangle the person who said this to her. Daring to use such stupid words to fool a true nirvana saint, he must be tired of living. Qin Yu waited for a while. In the end, it was the yard master who came. The look in her eyes became more and more complicated, and there was something strange between her brows. This made him more and more uneasy. "Master!" The yard master waved her hand and said, "Put away the divine seal." "This is there no hope?" Qin Yu's heart was heavy, but he also didn't believe this. He was clearly doing well. Moreover, the old tortoise at the peak of the death-fearing domain was still here. If there was really a problem with Qin Yu's divine seal, he would definitely tell her. He wouldn't have in the past, but now that they were in the same boat, This guy definitely wouldn't dare to hide it. This doesn't seem right. After putting away the divine seal, Qin Yu's mind was in a mess. He looked at the yard master in front of him and his mouth moved, but he didn't know what to say. The only thing he was thinking about was that if there was a problem with his divine seal, would the yard master still treat him as a member of the 4.5 people team? If he was kicked out, would he be in danger? After all, Qin Yu knew too many things now. Everything was fine. But how did things suddenly come to this stage? Could it be that the twice-saint slaying was too arrogant and was finally getting his retribution? The yard master took a deep breath and then slowly exhaled. Although it was a little unbelievable, it was ultimately good news. He had outstanding aptitude, was hardworking, and had a bright future. But the yard master had seen too many examples of people who lost their lives when they went out and died prematurely. Therefore, luck couldn't be ignored either. Qin Yu's foundation was unquestionable. Now that she looked at it carefully, his luck was also excellent, and his future was promising. But why do I still feel a little indignant? Am I envious? Humph, how is that possible? I'm a true Nirvana saint, one step away from becoming a ruler. I only need one finger to crush Qin Yu to death. How can I be envious of him? What a joke! But the yard master's expression became increasingly ugly, because she couldn't deceive herself. The more he vehemently denied it, the more it proved something. Because she was really indignant. Why, even as a true saint, I don't dare to try the self-condensing divine seal. But Qin Yu succeeded so easily. Not only did he succeed, but he was extremely successful. So successful that it was unbelievable. He took the endless galaxy and strung it into a curtain of beads. The reason why legends were called legends was that, basically, no one had seen it with their own eyes. But today, a legend had been verified. As someone who had personally experienced it, the yard master was still able to remain so calm. She was definitely shrewd and deep. Steady, steady. As a true saint, how could she be so easily shocked by her own disciple? Even if she was really shocked, she couldn't show it in the slightest. Otherwise, how would she lead the team in the future? How would she maintain the dignity of the saint path and the master path? The yard master coughed softly. Don't show your divine seal to others easily in the future. Don't ask for the reason. Just do as I say. She didn't want to explain, at least not today. I'm a true saint, so I'll be willful. Qin Yu relaxed. Although it was only one round, the situation seemed to be a little different from what he had imagined. Does this mean it's okay? He looked at the yard master without saying anything, but his eyes had already fully revealed his attitude. The yard master's chest tumbled, and she snorted coldly. It's okay. Your divine seal is very good, but it's different from what I imagined. She paused for a moment, and finally couldn't help but say with a sigh, the true divinity path. There are indeed few people in the vast Yang world who dare to walk this path. Qin Yu blinked. Master, what is the true divinity path? The yard master almost had a mental breakdown. You've even condensed the galaxy divine seal, and you're asking me what is the true divinity path? Boy, there should be a limit to your jokes. That's not right. She suddenly remembered that Qin Yu was born in a low-level world. In addition, the time he had spent in this world was too short, so it was normal that he didn't know many things about the St. Tao Circle. I've obviously figured it out, but why do I feel even more depressed? Steady, steady, I have to steady my aura. As a true saint, I have to be magnanimous and have a heart that can accommodate mountains. It's just a small matter, and it's not worth getting angry over. It's just a true divinity path, and it's not like I haven't seen it before. Moreover, the more powerful this boy Qin Yu is, the more likely it is that my daughter will be saved. Similarly, from the side, it proves that his judgment of people is as awesome as ever, and he has never made a mistake. The yard master calmly took another breath and said, Previously you said that it wasn't smooth for you to condense the divine seal, so you interfered with it by self-condensing. You probably know the reason why it wasn't smooth, right? Qin Yu nodded. Yes, before I broke through to the divine realm, I comprehended too many rules. so I couldn't condense the divine seal completely. For a normal cultivator, comprehending 9 rules of heaven and earth before reaching the divine realm is already the limit. Condensing a divine seal with 9 rules is already considered amazing. Among them, those who are lucky or have outstanding natural endowments, or can condense 10 rules of the divine seal. The yard master glanced at Qin Yu. Calculate. How many rules did you use when you condensed the divine seal? Qin Yu was speechless. He didn't count. The key was counting, and he definitely couldn't count clearly. But one thing was certain. It was definitely more than 10. The yard master's voice was calm. Cultivators of the divine path can continue to comprehend the rules of heaven and earth, using the divine seal as the core, and continue to merge with it until they reach a certain limit and condense the divine source. Then they can advance to the original God realm. But you're different. The divine seal condensed by the rules of heaven and earth exceeds the limit will not be able to merge with new rules, but will exist in parallel. To put it simply, even if you comprehend more rules of heaven and earth and merge them into the divine seal, your power will be enhanced, but you will never be able to condense the divine source, and you can't step into the original God realm. Qin Yu's eyes widened, thinking that the yard master was joking, right? How could this not be a problem? The true God path, what the hell? If he couldn't even step into the original God realm, he couldn't find the sea of bitterness, and he had no hope of reaching the divine path. You can't even reach the divine path, and you still want to go one step further and attack the vacant position of the ruler? Haha, hurry up and wash up and sleep. Reality is too cruel, and everything can happen in dreams. Qin Yu's voice was dry. This matter was too serious. It not only involved his future cultivation, but also concerned the life and death of Ningling and Yu Qi. A crippled disciple who couldn't even reach the original God realm was certainly of no use. How could he expect a divine path to keep his word? It was already good enough that he didn't kill him. Master, help me. The corner of the yard master's eyes twitched. She lowered her voice and roared. You probably didn't hear me clearly. I said that although I can't reach the original God realm, my strength can be enhanced. Qin Yu thought about it. There seemed to be such a sentence. The yard master sneered. If you were really crippled, would I still be in the mood to talk nonsense with you? You're very smart, boy. Don't play dumb in front of me. He took a deep breath and told himself to maintain his demeanor. The true God path is not easy, but now it seems that it might be a lucky choice. After all, the ruler position has been vacant for a long time. There are so many people who walk the right path, but none of them see hope. Perhaps there will be more opportunities if we take another path. Qin Yu coughed lightly and laughed dryly. I did have some speculations, but Master, you didn't give me a definite answer, so I'm worried. In other words, I don't have any problems. Instead, I have a little advantage. The Galaxy Divine Seal, the true God path. In addition to light and dark space-time, when all of these were superimposed together, could this be called a little advantage? If this was called a little advantage, how could others live? The yard master immediately decided that she couldn't let Qin Yu continue to stay here today. Otherwise, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to control herself and ruin her image. After all, even in the past, her foundation as a true saint was far inferior to hers. She waved her hand. Before Qin Yu could react, his vision blurred, and he appeared outside the courtyard. The yard master's muffled voice sounded. I need to make some considerations about your future cultivation. You can go back first. More or less aware of the change in the yard master's mood, Qin Yu bowed and turned to leave. A sharp light flashed in his eyes. It seemed that not only was there no problem with the divine seal he had condensed, but it was also very good. There was also the true God path. He had to investigate it when he got back and figure out what was going on. It was time to make up for his shortcomings in basic common sense. This thought had crossed his mind more than once, but Qin Yu was too pressed for time. He basically didn't have much free time. Moreover, the speed of his progress was too frightening. Often, before he could figure out what was going on, he had already improved a step further. Sure enough, growing too fast was also a kind of trouble, and this kind of trouble had accompanied him for many years. What should I do? I'm waiting online, very anxious. If the yard master had really cultivated a method similar to his mind-reading ability, she might not be able to restrain herself when she sensed Qin use current thoughts. She would risk ruining her image to teach him a lesson. Seriously, she had lived for so many years, but she had never seen such an arrogant person. Chapter 1247. Of course, it wasn't possible for the peach garden to only be filled with peach trees. In truth, the area was extremely large and there were many grand buildings. However, starting from the yard master, the few people with real status in the peach blossom garden all liked to live in small courtyards. On the other hand, those who lived in the majestic palaces of the peach garden were those who lived on the periphery of the peach garden. Of course, although they were people on the periphery, it wasn't easy for them to enter the peach garden and settle down here. As mentioned before, the servants responsible for the trivial matters of the peach garden could cause the outside world to fight over them. If one didn't have a certain background and strength, they simply weren't qualified. Qin Yu was currently walking through a great hall of the peach garden. The servants that came and went respectfully bowed, the words Mr. Ninth filled with awe. Mr. Ninth was the lowest ranked disciple, but he was still a mister. In the peach garden, his status was only inferior to the garden master, and several exalted. Moreover, everyone knew that Miss Peach Girl was about to marry and that Mr. Ninth was even more honored than before. He was regarded as the future ruler of the peach garden. Disregarding status, just at the East Sea's longevity banquet, Mr. Ninth had slaughtered the Saint Shishan Lini. Just this matter was enough to exclaim in admiration. Mr. Ninth, the ancient texts you are looking for are on this bookshelf. The cultivator leading the way was a woman, perhaps because she was accompanied by all sorts of ancient texts all year round. She had a scholarly air about her. Her eyebrows were soft and clear, making her look very comfortable. She glanced at Qin Yu and lowered her head. I will wait outside. If Mr. Ninth needs help, please call me at any time. She bowed and left. Qin Yu wasn't in the mood to look at this girl. Even on the way here, this girl's eyes revealed some warmth that tickled his heart. His divine sense swept over the bookshelf. Soon he discovered something. Qin Yu reached out and a thick book fell into his hand. He flipped through it. A moment later, he closed the book. After a moment of thought, he put it back and took out a second book, and so on and so forth. After reading through 7 or 8 books, Qin Yu finally had a clear understanding of the true divinity Tao. Along the way, he also found some information about the self-concentration divine seal. Then he felt that he should burn some incense. To successfully condense the self-concentration divine seal on his first try and not kill himself, he really was lucky. Things of the past were already in the past, so there was no need to think about them and scare himself. Qin Yu took a deep breath and suppressed these thoughts. He couldn't help but frown. God Realm, Original God Realm, Sacred Path, Sovereign Realm. This was a general and rough division of realms. It also had many details. For example, after the peak of Original God Realm, there were 3 realms: Hopeful Sea Realm, Sea Observing Realm, and Sea Observing Realm. Of course, it wasn't detailed here. In short, this was the most orthodox cultivation path in the eyes of vast young cultivators. There were traces that could be followed. The road ahead had already been walked by countless seniors, so it was certain that it could indeed be walked. But if there was light in the world, there would also be darkness. If there was a righteous path, then there would naturally be some unorthodox paths. For example, condensing the divine seal in an attempt to obtain a brighter and more resplendent future. Some lunatics who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, or were full of confidence in themselves, proposed the slogan, "My fate is in my own hands, not in the hands of the heavens," and the clamor finally dissipated. The inheritance of the divine condensation seal was severed because its success rate was too low, and the price it had to pay was too high, to the point of losing one's life. The true God path was another side path. Previously, it was mentioned that cultivators had their own limits, and those who could break through to the immortal realm were few and far between. Most of them would never be able to reach it in their entire lives. But what about after breaking through to the immortal realm? It was even more difficult to reach the original God realm. Not even 1 out of 100 true gods could have such a chance. The great path was severed, and there was no way to advance. Some people accepted their fate and abandoned all restraints, living a free and unfettered life. But some people didn't accept it. Not only did they not accept it, but they also tried to change their fate. Thus, they created the true God realm. The so-called true God meant the true God path, which was used to distinguish the realms of the God path. Later on, as time went by, the cultivators who had entered this path had increased in number. Their numbers had increased, and they had also established another cultivation system. They thought that all living beings in this world who had cultivated to the God realm had reached the threshold of life transformation. In other words, they were qualified to pursue immortality. The difference was that the power they controlled was too little, and their bodies weren't strong enough. As long as they could comprehend enough rules of heaven and earth and fuse them into the divine seal, they could become stronger and stronger. When the number of rules they fused with reached a certain limit, they would have a qualitative change. Unfortunately, this cultivation system had suffered a destructive blow. Fusing with the rules of heaven and earth continuously could make them stronger. Even the true God realm cultivators at the God realm could have the power that could rival or even defeat the original God realm experts. But the mentioned qualitative change had never been discovered. Not just that, but obtaining an incomparably formidable strength at the divine Tao realm also brought with it massive hidden dangers. As they comprehended more and more rules and their strength rose, the true God realm powerhouses found it difficult to control. Countless of them blew themselves up. The stronger they were, and the higher their talent was, the harder it was to avoid blowing themselves up. In the end, this caused the strongest powerhouses of the true God path to perish one after another. The remaining weak ones were panic-stricken and didn't dare to continue fusing with the rules of heaven and earth. But as time passed, an even crueler matter was slowly confirmed. Perhaps it was because the existence of the true God path itself went against the will of the world. Even though these cultivators were strong, they didn't obtain a lifespan that could compare to their strength. In fact, they were far inferior to ordinary divine Tao cultivators. In the end, they could only wither away and collapse, filled with despair and unwillingness, turning into dirt. It was because of this that the true God path gradually fell into desolation, becoming a cultivation path that only a few people knew about. Qin Yu rubbed his temples. Although he could see everything clearly, he still felt that something wasn't right. But there was one thing that couldn't be wrong. The future of the true God path was uncertain, and most of them had short lives. Qin Yu hadn't experienced the baptism of tens of thousands of years, so he wasn't too sensitive to this aspect. And more importantly, he had unknowingly stepped into the true God path. Unless he destroyed his own divine seal, this was a path that he couldn't turn back from. He could only grit his teeth and brace himself to the end. Destroying his own divine seal, forget it. Unless Qin Yu was prepared to risk a 99% chance of crippling himself, he wouldn't choose this path. The Yard Master had also said that the righteous path had walked for so many years, but no one had succeeded in filling the vacancy of the ruler's position. Perhaps there might be other lucky chances in the true God path. Forget it. Qin Yu rubbed his face and turned to leave. The scholarly female cultivator bowed. "Take care, Mr. Ninth." Qin Yu glanced at her. In truth, she was indeed a woman who made one feel comfortable looking at her, whether it was in appearance or temperament. But because he felt comfortable looking at her, he only glanced at her. Qin Yu didn't ask for her name, nor did he pause in his steps. He nodded and left. Now, All he could think about was how the yard master was going to arrange for his cultivation, since he had become a member of the Peach Garden's 4.5 people squad. Qin Yu wouldn't be aloof or arrogant. He wouldn't rely on his own ability to break through to the ruler realm. That wasn't called strength of character or integrity. It could only be called stupidity. He couldn't do such a stupid thing, not even if he was beaten to death. Qin Yu couldn't do something like not having a backer, so he was really looking forward to it. He hoped that the yard master could help him pave a bright path. Even if this idea was too extravagant and unrealistic, it could at least help him point out a bright path. With the guidance of the old turtle, Qin Yu had long since experienced the importance of a good teacher in cultivating the light and darkness integration. After returning to his residence, Qin Yu asked the old turtle for advice on cultivation while waiting patiently. But what came first wasn't the yard master summoning him again, but Lei Xiaoyu, who came to say goodbye. Big brother Qin, I'm going out with eldest senior brother to do something. She hesitated and said, during this time, no matter what you hear, it's best not to get involved. Focus on recuperating. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. His eyes flickered. What are you going to do? Lei Xiaoyu shook her head. I can't tell you. Anyway, just listen to me. She was obviously afraid that Qin Yu would continue asking. She got up in a hurry. Big brother Qin, I have to go back and prepare. She turned and left. The azure dragon on her shoulder turned its head and glared at Qin Yu proudly. It was probably saying, I'm going to do something that you don't even know. This fellow was quite vengeful. It was such a small matter back then, but now it wanted to get back at him. Qin Yu smiled. Since eldest senior brother was going, Lei Xiaoyu's safety should be no problem. But he didn't know what it was that eldest senior brother, who had been in seclusion, had to come out personally. On the third day after eldest senior brother left the peach garden with Lei Xiaoyu, Qin Yu finally received the yard master summon. It was different this time. He was sitting and resting a moment ago, but in the blink of an eye he was already in front of the yard master. TSK. She was indeed a true saint. Her superb spatial techniques were far superior to Qin Yu's. But why did he feel that the yard master was deliberately showing off? It couldn't be. She was a true saint of the Permitha continent. How could she do such a thing? Ahem. The yard master didn't give Qin Yu much time to think. She coughed lightly and went straight to the point. After going to the Hall of Ancient Records, you should have a good understanding of the true divinity path, right? Qin Yu cupped his hands together. Yes, I have investigated. As he spoke, he revealed a trace of hesitation. But I don't know why, but I feel that something is wrong. The yard master frowned. What's wrong? Qin Yu said honestly, isn't it said that those who can comprehend the 9 laws of heaven and earth before attaining the divine path have excellent aptitude? But the records I saw of the cultivators who cultivated the true divinity path didn't seem to be like that. He had already thought of what he felt was wrong in the past few days. He looked at the yard master and waited for her explanation. As an old fellow who had lived through 3 cycles of divine path samsara, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she was a living fossil. She definitely knew the key points. The yard master grunted. This matter is actually very simple. Someone was afraid of losing face, so he deliberately passed down the ancient records in such a way as to cover up the truth of the past. She glanced at Qin Yu. This boy was really meticulous. After knowing that she had stepped onto the true divinity path, he was still able to detect this. Clearly, he wasn't easy to fool. From another perspective, he was confident that he wouldn't be trapped by the true divinity path. Although it was good for Qin Yu to be more confident now, the yard master still felt a little uncomfortable looking at him like this. It seemed that the sudden use of space transfer to pull him over just now didn't shock this boy too much. The true divinity path was first discovered by a junior cultivator of a large sect with amazing aptitude. It was a newly discovered great Tao of cultivation that rapidly increased one's strength. There might even be an extremely distant and unknown future. Therefore, at the very beginning, many people regarded the true divinity path as the true great Tao of cultivation. It was a test to distinguish geniuses from mediocrity. After all, it was extremely difficult to completely comprehend and control more than 10 laws of heaven and earth before reaching the divine path. In that era, the various holy lands of the vast young world. Of course, they were different from the current holy lands. In short, they were a group of old fellows who tacitly approved of their disciples stepping onto the true divinity path. They tried to find the possibility of taking a step further from them, but you already know the result. The true divinity path was not easy to walk. Of all the cultivators who stepped onto it, the most outstanding ones self-destructed one after another. The rest all died of depression and their lives were ruined. You should know that those who were able to step onto the true divinity path were all absolute geniuses. They were even the most dazzling existences of that era. But it was because they were too outstanding that they ruined themselves on the true divinity path. Instead, it was the remaining cultivators who weren't so outstanding who survived the great waves. Some even crossed the sea of bitterness and became true saints. That old dragon in the East Sea succeeded in this way. Otherwise, with his aptitude, he wouldn't have been able to reach where he is today. The last sentence was filled with the contempt of a top student towards a bad student. Chapter 1248. But even if he was a scum in the past, he had now become the dragon sage of the East Sea. Qin didn't dare to say anything, so he pretended not to hear. After hearing the garden master's explanation, Qin understood. Destroying the most outstanding geniuses of an entire era, causing countless brilliant stars that should have been able to shine with a tyrannical pressure to perish. This was certainly a scandal. In particular, everyone was involved in this scandal. For the sake of face or to maintain one's dignity, joining hands to suppress the truth was certainly the best choice. That was why there were so many records in the ancient books. As for being full of loopholes, did anyone care? History was like this. It was up to them to believe it or not. After all, the so-called ancient books could only be passed down by those with strength and a powerful background. The truth of history lies in what these people want you to see. Dark, really dark. At this moment, Qin sighed again. He thought that if he didn't do well in the future, he, the Peach Garden's Mr. Ninth who had killed a saint twice, might be famous for a while, but in the future no one would know him at all. As the saying goes, a man leaves his name behind, and a goose leaves its sound behind. After living in this life, if he couldn't leave a trace in the world, it would be too tragic. Otherwise, he should set a small goal for himself, so that he could at least be listed in the ancient books in the future. After all, the realm of ruler was easy to say, but it was too far away. It was so far away that Qin still didn't know how to achieve it. After saying a bunch of nonsense, the yard master also gave Qin an obscure lesson. Without strength and status, he might become a passerby recorded in history. After all, he was a true divine and had the right to write history. Furthermore, even if he was no longer around, no one would have the guts to delete his name. At most, they would just slander him and smear his name a little. But he would definitely be engraved in the records of the vast young world, becoming a part that couldn't be ignored. As for Qin, this boy was really smart. Obviously, he understood something. He had strength, means, talent, luck, and he was smart enough. The yard master told herself to stay calm, but this boy was right in front of her. If she couldn't grasp him tightly, she wouldn't feel at ease. Have you seen the female official in charge of the Hall of Ancient Records? Qin didn't know what this question meant, so he nodded honestly. The yard master said, "If you marry Peach Girl, I'll make the decision to give her to you." If he were to drink water now, Qin would definitely spit it out. He thought to himself, "You're a true divine. Is it really okay for you to say such things?" But the yard master's expression was calm, and her eyes were sharp and penetrating. Obviously, she was not joking. How would Qin answer? He had no choice but to pretend that he didn't hear it. The yard master furrowed her brows and sneered inwardly. I don't believe that you can persist like this. There wasn't much time, but that was only for an old man who had lived through 3 cycles of the divine Tao. In fact, he knew very well that there would be plenty of opportunities in the future. He would just have to wait and see. You are destined to belong to the peach garden. Don't even think about escaping. The yard master took a deep breath and calmed herself down. She said calmly, the cultivation of the true God path is different from the orthodox path. You already know what happened to those people back then. Have you figured out the reason? Qin Yu respectfully bowed. I ask, Honorable Master, to teach me. The divine path is, after all, the divine path. It's like a bottle with a limited capacity. How can it contain the rivers and the seas? The true God path takes the path of overturning the rivers and the seas. Both sides are diametrically opposed, and the outcome is determined. The yard master's voice was calm. Therefore, this path can be said to be extremely difficult, but it can also be said to be simple. As long as the bottle can be forged to be large and strong enough to contain the rivers and the seas, it will definitely trigger an unprecedented qualitative change. At this point, the yard master let out a light breath. Therefore, the cultivation system of the true God path is not necessarily wrong. It's just that it's very difficult for someone to truly walk to the end. Forget it. She looked at Qin Yu with calm eyes. You've already embarked on this path. Unless you stop cultivating from now on and wait for time to pass until you wither, you can only desperately become stronger. The stronger you are, the more rules of heaven and earth you can accommodate. Otherwise, your outcome will be no different from those people back then. With a bang, you'll explode. Of course, your explosion might be even louder. The corner of Qin Yu's mouth twitched. He thought to himself, if you're not the yard master, you'll easily get beaten up for talking like this. Do you know that? But he was the yard master, so Qin Yu could only endure it. Not only did he have to endure it, but he also had to bow respectfully. Thank you for your advice, Honorable Master. Looking at the yard master, he had an expectant look on his face. In this world, there was no such thing as stopping after discussing a problem with someone. Since the dignified, true saint had found the crux of the problem, of course, he had to provide a further solution. For example, how to forge the bottle bigger and stronger. The yard master finally felt balanced. Ever since she saw Qin Yu's divine seal, the anger that had been stuck in her chest had mostly dissipated. No matter how arrogant you are, no matter how much you jump around, don't you still need my guidance? Humph. Understand the status of a true saint. After a slight pause, the yard master said indifferently with a saintly expression, Today I summoned you here because there's a lucky chance that has coincidentally arrived. I want you to take a share of it. If everything goes smoothly, you won't have to worry about your body exploding for a period of time. Qin Yu glanced at the yard master out of the corner of his eye. At this moment his brows had relaxed. His mind raced for a while, and he seemed to have understood something. Immediately he bowed and said in an even more respectful tone, Disciple respectfully listens. The yard master coughed lightly. When the vast young world was first formed, tens of thousands of races coexisted and fought for supremacy over the world. In the midst of cruel killings, they fought for the survival space of their races. At that time, the vast young world didn't have a ruler, nor did it have a divine path. In reality, the rulers were powerful life forms that were born at the beginning of the world's formation. They were the true darlings of the world. They were born with formidable strength. That was true strength. I've experienced a few of them before. The top existences among them were comparable to today's rulers. However, their success was due to the vast yang, and their failure was also due to the vast yang. These life forms were too strong and influenced by their natural instincts. They were cruel and bloodthirsty. Gradually, they affected the continuation of the tens of thousands of races, and in the end, they were eliminated by the river of time. The yard master paused and continued, As the cycle of existence approached its end, these ancient and powerful life forms should have carried out a struggle. None of them were willing to accept the fate of being eliminated and swept into the abyss. At the same time, they made another preparation to deal with the unpredictable outcome. Facts have proven that the struggle of these ancient life forms should have failed. In fact, this is very normal. No one can contend with the world. This is their conclusion, and also a reminder for you. Chinyu, no matter where you go in the future, you must firmly remember that you must be in awe of the world. Seeing Chinyu solemnly nod, the yard master raised a hand and rapped the table. The story is over. Now, let's officially enter the main topic. The lucky chance that I mentioned to you just now is another preparation that these ancient life forms have made. We call this the Lost Garden. It is like a world that has been forgotten by time. It preserves the environment of the ancient world when it was first formed. It is the final effort of these ancient life forms for the continuation of their bloodline. Perhaps they had already anticipated that the decline would be inevitable, so they built the Lost Garden. Your eldest senior apprentice brother, third senior apprentice brother, and eighth senior apprentice sister have already left with the Azure Dragon. In order to prevent you from entering the Lost Garden, I have already made other arrangements. Chinyu carefully asked, "Isn't this disciple going with my senior apprentice brothers and sisters?" Lei Xiaoyu didn't need to mention it. Eldest senior apprentice brother and third senior apprentice brother were both fierce people, especially eldest senior apprentice brother. It would be much safer to follow him. The corner of the yard master's eye twitched. She added another label to Chinyu. Besides the previous ones, he was also thick-skinned enough, flexible and not inflexible at all. If he could find a backer, he would find one. Most of these people lived for a long time. This could be considered a good thing. This time, only your eldest senior apprentice brother knows that you will also enter the Lost Garden. Unless it is absolutely necessary, don't expose it. This time, it is best to keep a low profile. Take what you need and leave. Do you understand what I mean? Chinyu nodded vigorously. There was nothing he could do. There were too many potential enemies, and there were countless people who wanted to kill him. In addition, there was also the extremely terrifying West Mountain Scholatry Sage. Moreover, there were some things that the yard master didn't say too bluntly. Chinyu had already guessed them. Sending his eldest senior apprentice brother to the Lost Garden was enough to show how dangerous it was. From this, it could be seen that the other influences that had the qualifications to know the existence of the Lost Garden had also sent their top characters. If Chinyu were to clash with them, it would be difficult for him to conceal himself. Once he exposed too much, gathering light and darkness, space-time into one, it was enough to drive many people crazy. Even his status as the son-in-law of the Peach Blossom Garden might not be able to suppress them. This would be detrimental to his future peaceful life. Only by listening to the old would he not suffer a loss. He had to keep a low profile and quietly enter the village. Seeing Chinyu's solemn expression, as if he had really heard her words, the garden master nodded inwardly. She tossed him a jade slip and said, "This contains some information about the Lost Garden as well as my arrangements for you. Be careful not to blow it up the moment you leave." After he caught it, the yard master flicked her sleeves. Chinyu's vision blurred. He thought that the yard master was trying to show off her skills again. Was it so hard to accept being suppressed by her own disciple? Shwa! Chinyu's vision recovered. What appeared in front of him was a transmission gate. It wasn't quite the same as Peach Maiden's. It looked a bit shabby, and the woven peach with branches seemed much smaller and more tender. Sure enough, she only had one daughter. This difference in treatment, TSK, the yard master really didn't want to hide anything at all. Chinyu's divine sense entered the jade slip. After a moment, he took it back. After making sure that he had memorized all the contents, he exerted a bit of force with his fingers. With a light crack, the jade slip shattered and his appearance changed. Chinyu stretched his limbs and stepped into the transmission gate. The following transmission process was far worse. It wasn't as safe and comfortable as when he was by Peach made inside. After swaying for a while, light suddenly bloomed. Qin Yu subconsciously squinted and raised his hand to block it. An indifferent voice sounded in his ears. Tell your ancestors that the favor they owed me in the past will be written off. As the eldest disciple of Dragon Mountain's half-sage, it had been many years since Cliff Ping had suffered such a loss. The Lost Garden was about to open. Because his sect had found a pangolin beast, they also had the qualifications to enter. It was just that the bloodline of a pangolin beast wasn't too strong, and the number of people it could bring was limited. Dragon Mountain's half-sage took out 2 more as a favor, leaving only 3 spots for the Holy Land. Although he was the eldest disciple of a half-sage and was usually trusted, Cliff Ping had always acted appropriately. Although his master often scolded him for giving birth to a good-for-nothing, he still doted on his only son. Of the 3 spots, 1 had to be given to Longfeng. This was something that Dragon Mountain's half-sage wouldn't allow. Cliff Ping had knelt on the ground and begged for it. The second spot was, of course, Cliff Ping himself. As the strongest person below the Saint Realm, this was a matter of course. He took it calmly. After all, the Lost Garden was filled with dangers. In a situation where the Saint Path could intervene, he could provide the greatest guarantee of safety. The final spot was given to a junior apprentice sister. Although this junior apprentice sister hadn't been in the sect for long, this cold and aloof junior apprentice sister was actually as gentle as water to Cliff Ping in private. After another round of lovemaking, Cliff Ping couldn't bear the pleas of the naked junior apprentice sister in his arms and agreed. Everything had been decided. But who would have thought that Dragon Mountain's half-sage would suddenly interfere and take away the 3rd spot that was given to his junior apprentice sister? Cliff Ping's anger soared to the heavens, but he didn't dare to say a single word. After spending a great deal of effort, he still wasn't able to make his junior apprentice sister happy. After suffering a heavy kick, the 2 of them had completely broken up. He didn't dare to act out against a saint, not even the son of a saint. Then everything would fall on this boy who had appeared out of nowhere. Chapter 1249. Yen Ping controlled his temper and quietly inquired about it. The feedback he got from various parties made him sneer. A family that had been in decline for a long time had used a favor owed by the sage to exchange for this quota. It was said that the sage was not very happy about this, so there was nothing to worry about. How dangerous was the Lost Garden? Was it a place that anyone could enter? If they barely squeezed in without the qualifications, the biggest possibility was that they would lose their lives. Therefore, Qin Yu found that the eldest disciple of the Dragon Mountain sage was very enthusiastic towards him, as if they were brothers who had finally met after being separated for so many years. Of course, they were not brothers, so there was most likely a demon behind this. Qin Yu's face was filled with panic and gratitude, and his acting was flawless. After all, after experiencing many things, one would find that good acting skills were sometimes very important and could even save one's life. It was not difficult to feign civility, so he could just deal with it first. In any case, he could leave after entering the Lost Garden. It had to be said that the Yard Master's disguise technique was really amazing. Even the Dragon Mountain sage could not sense anything wrong in front of her. This made Qin Yu feel relieved. It seemed that as long as he kept a low profile, the chances of being discovered were not high. After staying for 2 days, his eldest senior brother and the others had already set off for a long time. Just as Qin Yu could not help but mutter to himself, the people of the Dragon Mountain, Holy Land, finally set off. Including Qin Yu, there were a total of 5 people and 1 beast. The 5 people were burdens, and this beast was the main character. Qin Yu had memorized the contents of the jade slip, so he naturally knew about this. Although the name Lost Garden was given by modern cultivators, the truth was that this place was prepared by powerful ancient beings to continue their bloodline. Only those with a recognized bloodline were allowed to enter. Unfortunately, this final inheritance was destined to be divided up, and only a small portion of it could be obtained by the descendants of ancient beings. Of course, it was also possible that the extinct ancient beings had already anticipated this. Otherwise, they would not have left a loophole that allowed their descendants to bring people in. Losing money to avoid disasters to protect their descendants was probably referring to this kind of thing. Qin Yu casually thought about it, but on the surface he was very reserved. He lowered his head, as if he had no idea what to do, and just followed the crowd. Yan Ping laughed heartily. He brought the young man beside him and chatted with the two people in front of him. Both sides laughed from time to time, and the atmosphere was very harmonious. Seeing Qin Yu not respond, Yan Ping intentionally shifted the topic to him several times. Qin Yu barely managed to say a few words before he couldn't continue. In his heart, he was thinking that he was about to enter the severed garden. So where did he have the time to waste with them? Yan Ping laughed coldly in his heart, thinking that he had done enough. Even if someone died after this, he wouldn't be suspected. Finally, he smiled apologetically at Qin Yu and turned his head away, concentrating on speaking with the two people across from him. It was a man and a woman. Both of them were quite good-looking, and their eyebrows and eyes were somewhat similar. Perhaps they were related by blood. Tan Hai was conversing with Yan Ping when he glanced at his sister from the corner of his eyes. He couldn't help but frown. Of course, the extent of the frown was very small, and it disappeared in a flash. Even if one looked carefully, one might not be able to notice it. Outsiders might not be able to see anything, but he had a deep understanding of his cousin. Naturally, he could sense that there was something different about her at this moment. Taking advantage of the gap in their conversation, Tan Hai lightly coughed and brought up the topic of conversation with his cousin. Their gazes met for a moment before slipping away. The transmission began. After experiencing the transmission method of the Dragon Mountain Holy Lands, Qin Yu realized that the ultra-long distance transmission he had performed before was already of the highest quality. Now, this was what could be called wretched. With a ripping sound, space was torn apart and the 5 people and 1 beast hurried in. This was called a jolt. That's right, the mountain pangolin had an ancient life bloodline, but its name was very rustic. Perhaps it was the first time it had experienced this kind of transmission, so it was startled. This fellow was massive and took up most of the transmission space. As it tossed and turned, several people swayed along with it. Qin Yu couldn't appear as if he didn't move at all. That would be the same as telling others that there was a problem with him and that they should come and suspect him. Even though he hadn't entered the Lost Garden, his acting skills still had to be up to par. Qin Yu swayed along with it, occasionally calling out in a low voice. Then, in the next moment, he felt as if he had knocked over someone. His arm slammed into the ground, and he hurriedly swayed to the other side. Yan Ping actually had some skill. He was able to calm down the startled mountain pangolin. The violently shaking transmission finally stabilized a little. Shwa! Light suddenly descended. The transmission was over. Qin Yu hurriedly closed his eyes and then opened them again. He looked around with a bit of panic in his eyes, perfectly displaying the performance he should have. Acting was something that could be a bit addictive. Once he started, he would unconsciously want to perform better. Just as Qin Yu thought his acting skills had improved, his eyes met a pair of eyes. The girl blushed, and she couldn't help but glare at him. Qin Yu maintained his composure and pretended not to see anything. He looked away, puzzled. There were so many people, and it was so dark, so how did they know it was him? Yan Ping took a deep breath. He smiled and said, "Everyone, we have arrived. The Lost Garden will soon open, so let's find a place to settle down first." After he finished speaking, he quickly led the others away. He had no choice but to be fast. In the short time that he had just arrived after breaking through space, he could feel eyes locking onto him from all directions. None of them were good to provoke, and some of them even made him feel as if he was being burned by fire. In fact, this was also the first time that Yan Ping had participated in the opening of the Lost Garden. He was secretly shaken, but he also couldn't help but feel a fiery heat. In addition to the rumors he had heard before, his expectations towards the Lost Garden had risen to the highest point. If everything went smoothly this time, he might be able to find that sea, and there would be hope for him to step onto the divine path. As Yen Ping was excited, he didn't forget how his junior apprentice sister had kicked him in the balls of his flesh. Even now, he could clearly remember that pleasurable feeling. He turned to look at Chinyu and immediately revealed a warm and generous smile. "Brat, I'll let you jump around a bit longer. Once we enter the Lost Garden, that will be the day you die." The people from the Dragon Mountain Holy Lands hadn't arrived early, and all the good spots had been taken. Yen Ping didn't have any other thoughts, and honestly chose a place where there was no one around. Anyone that had the qualifications to come here today wasn't an ordinary character. It was best to forget about trying to cause trouble for oneself. After exchanging a few more words, everyone settled down. For cultivators, unless it was an extremely short environment, it was very simple to find a place to stay. Across from him, a man and woman took out a small palace. It swelled in the wind and quickly expanded. They bowed and entered. Long Feng's eyes widened. He couldn't help but lick his lips. He nudged his senior apprentice brother with his shoulder. "Yen Ping, what do you think of this palace?" Yen Ping nodded. He said in a low voice, "It's very unusual. It seems that the family that traded with Honorable Master has some background." Long Feng sneered. "It's not just background. I'm afraid there are other reasons why they deliberately walked through our family's door. This palace, I've seen it before. The old man refused to buy it for me. Its value is astonishing." As he spoke, he glanced at the closed palace doors. After walking some distance away, he summoned his own palace. It wasn't bad, but there were always comparisons. Long Feng sighed twice and then pushed open the doors and walked in. Yen Ping sneered inwardly. "In terms of eyesight, I can throw you off by 80 streets. If it weren't for the fact that you cultivated your reincarnation technique well, would you even have the qualifications to serve me tea right now? For someone like you to have ideas about other people's girls, you might as well rest early." Without changing his expression, Yen Ping turned and asked Chinyu whether or not he wanted to rest with him. After being politely declined, he smiled and said, "Junior apprentice Brother Qin, there is no need to be nervous. If that's the case, then I won't say anything more." Being kind to others and having an elegant demeanor, this was probably how he was acting right now. It was said that the more noble one's background was, the more importance they placed on personal character. This was because other families weren't too bad. Perhaps I might even be noticed by that girl. This is a lucky chance. Thinking of this, Yen Ping's smile became even purer. He nodded to Chinyu and then waved his hand to summon his palace. "Who?" Chinyu let out a light breath. It was truly difficult for him to endure. If this fellow didn't leave soon, he would have vomited from disgust. With this, he still wanted to attract a girl? His courage was commendable. He didn't take out any palace or anything like that. As a junior from an impoverished family, he had come here bearing the fate of his family, so he had to perform perfectly. He was about to enter the Lost Garden. He couldn't allow any accidents to occur at the last moment. He walked to a quiet place and sat down. "Qin, you looked at the endless fog in the distance. Was the Lost Garden here?" He couldn't see it at all. As Chinyu looked at the fog with puzzlement in his heart, he didn't know that there were also people looking at him with puzzlement. The explorer furrowed his brows, then furrowed his brows again. However, he was unable to find anything different about the brat outside. He was just an ordinary nobody who didn't seem to have any background. So how could he be worth his cousin secretly paying attention to? Although he already knew that his cousin was the president of the Appearance Association, this boy surnamed Qin didn't seem handsome at all. "Sangju, do you know this boy?" In his opinion, this was the only possibility. "I don't know him." Sangju blushed red. "I would never know such a shameless person." The explorer hesitated for a moment. "Do you have any grudges before?" Sangju glared at him. Cousin, aren't you annoying? Why do you keep asking random questions? I don't even know this person. So how could there possibly be any grudges between us? Sea Explorer was left speechless. He also couldn't figure it out. You don't know him and you don't have any grudges with him. So why do you want to see him gnash his teeth and then abandon him after being toyed with? Cousin, this brother of yours is really fascinated by you. Tsang Zhu hatefully glared at Qinyu. This bastard, he was actually so calm and didn't reveal any abnormalities at all. Although her breasts weren't too big, a touch was still a touch. It was impossible for her not to feel anything. Keep pretending. I want to see you continue pretending. I already thought there was a problem with you before, and now I know it's definitely the case. If it were a boy without any background, would he be able to perform like this? Humph, humph. Just you wait. I will definitely grab hold of your pigtails and expose you. Qinyu thought his performance was perfect, but he never imagined that he would expose himself from this angle. If he knew, he would be left speechless. Wasn't he just carelessly touching her, and there really wasn't much of a feeling? Was there a need to be so relentless? Chapter 1250. The Lost Garden was indeed within the fog. When the first fluctuation came from the depths of the fog, it swept out like a wave, instantly attracting everyone's attention. A sharp light flashed in Qinyu's eyes. No wonder he hadn't found his eldest senior apprentice brother and the others. They had already entered. Of course, it wasn't just his eldest senior apprentice brother and the others who entered first. There were over a dozen other figures, and Qinyu recognized one of them. It was West Mountain's 9 heads, who had been blocked by his eldest senior apprentice brother at the East Sea's birthday banquet. As expected, Sage Sculletree's disciples had also arrived. Fortunately, they were prepared. If they were discovered by 9 heads, there would be a fierce battle. Third senior apprentice brother Bai Feng had a calm expression as he stood beside his eldest senior apprentice brother. Behind him was Lei Xiaoyuan. Qin, you couldn't help but glance at her. The feeling this little girl gave off didn't seem quite right. At this moment, Lei Xiaoyu frowned as if she had sensed something. Qinyu hurriedly lowered his head and looked away. This little girl's senses were so sharp. It seemed that he had underestimated her strength before. It hadn't been too long since they parted that year, but Lei Xiaoyu's strength had increased to such an astonishing degree. This filled Qinyu with confidence in the Garden Master's ability to teach disciples. At the same time, he looked forward to the Lost Garden. If the Garden Master had gone through so much trouble to let him enter, the lucky chances inside would definitely not be disappointing. Humph! There from the peach garden, Yan Ping sneered in a low voice. Qinyu glanced at him. Just one sentence was enough to determine that the relationship between the Dragon Mountain Holy Land and the Peach Garden wasn't too good. TSK, the Garden Master had good methods. Even in this situation, she could still use the Dragon Mountain Holy Land to smoothly let him enter the Lost Garden. It should also be out of consideration for his safety. No one would have thought that the disciples of the Peach Garden would be hiding among the cultivators of the Dragon Mountain Holy Land. Long Feng suddenly said, Senior apprentice brother, why did the people of the Peach Garden enter the fog first? Yan Ping's face stiffened. He thought that this was a stupid question. The reason they could enter first was because they were strong. If you were strong, you could also do it. But the problem was that he had just sneered and expressed his hostility towards the Peach Garden. Now he found it difficult to explain. Tan Hai chuckled and helped him out of his predicament. It is rumored that the seal of the Lost Garden is unsealed once every 10,000 years. It requires the bloodline of the most powerful ancient era's life forms to be unsealed. As for the various factions that entered first, I believe that they all control the descendants of the highest level ancient life forms. He did not directly state the disparity in strength. Instead, he explained it from this aspect. Although everyone knew that it was impossible to protect the descendants of peak ancient era's organisms without strength, at the very least he left them some face. Yan Ping gave him a grateful look and lightly coughed. what fellow Taoist Tan Hai said is correct. Of course, it's not like they didn't gain anything. When they open the seal, they can obtain an additional portion of the Lost Garden's power. Since these people have come out, it means that the seal has been opened. The entrance will open soon. Everyone be careful. Qin Yu thought that it was no wonder his elder senior apprentice brother and the others had come several days in advance. It was clear that they were opening the seal and conveniently eating a bite first. But what Qin Yu didn't understand was that the White Phoenix and the Azure Dragon were undoubtedly top existences amongst the ancient era's life forms. So, why did only his elder senior apprentice brother and Lei Xiaoyu come to the Peach Garden? The Dragon Mountain Holy Lands only had a rather cowardly pangolin, yet 5 people had come. In comparison, the Peach Garden should be able to obtain at least several dozen spots. His eyes turned and fell onto Nine-Headed. Beside him were clearly cultivators from the West Mountain Holy Lands, but there were only 2 of them. Looking at the 3 of them, there was a strange beast with a body as black as jade and a fierce and dignified appearance. It was clear that its rank wasn't low. Qin Yu didn't recognize the others, but if they could stand side by side with the Peach Garden and West Mountain and enter the fog first, they clearly weren't ordinary people. Looking carefully, the number of people was also in 2s and 3s. They clearly could have brought more people, but didn't. Was it because the benefits of the Lost Garden weren't great? Dee ruled out this possibility after a moment's thought. The reason was simple. If there weren't enough benefits, would so many holy lands participate? If the elder senior apprentice brother of the Peach Garden loved to go into seclusion and cultivate, would he personally lead a team? Then there was only one possibility left. The benefits were great, but at the same time it was extremely dangerous. Thus, everyone agreed to reduce the number of people in order to avoid unnecessary losses. Thinking about it this way, the Lost Garden was likely even more dangerous than they had imagined. Lei Xiaoyu, this girl had specifically reminded him not to run around in the near future. She was likely worried that Qin Yu would hear about the Lost Garden and have some thoughts. But shouldn't you be more concerned about yourself first? Although I admit that I underestimated your strength before, aren't you afraid of losing your little life by following elder senior apprentice brother here? Qin Yu frowned inwardly. This matter was naturally arranged by the garden master. He really couldn't figure out just what sort of logic this was. Even if second senior apprentice brother was punished to clean up the wine cellar, there were still others. For instance, 7th senior apprentice sister, who changed her face every day. Her strength was absolutely heaven-defying. 7th senior apprentice sister? Qin Yu's heart raced. His eyes carefully swept over Lei Xiaoyu's body. As he thought about the strange feeling he had before, as well as this girl's unexpectedly sharp senses, it couldn't be right. If this was really the case, then Honorable Master must have some idea this time. Did he want to trick West Mountain's Nine-Headed? That was highly possible. After all, based on his impression of the Garden Master, she wasn't someone who would suffer losses and swallow her blood. During the trip to the East Sea, Sage Scolatry had dared to touch Peach Girl. Although he didn't succeed in the end, he had still caused problems for Peach Girl. The Garden Master definitely couldn't tolerate this. Thinking of this, Qin Yu suddenly felt a little excited. West Mountain was also his enemy, and Sage Scolatry didn't dare to think about it for now. But if he could kill Nine-Headed first, that would be an incomparably wonderful matter. Perhaps he could even provide some help. Taking a deep breath to calm his mind, Qin Yu told himself to stay calm and wait until he entered the Lost Garden. Although killing Nine-Headed was important, what was even more important was to obtain the lucky chance that the ancient organisms had prepared for their juniors, the source of life. According to what was written in the jade slip, this was simply an extremely potent tonic soup. Soaking in it would not only strengthen the body, but it could also enhance the cultivation of the soul. It was simply tailor-made for Qin Yu, a medicine that could make the bottle even stronger and stronger. Although everything was fine right now and there weren't any abnormalities, no one knew which would come first, an accident, or tomorrow. Qin Yu didn't wish for someday in the future to suddenly explode like a giant firecracker. True divinity path, he hadn't even seen the benefits yet, but there were already a pile of hidden dangers. Yan Ping excitedly roared out, "It's open!" Qin Yu's random thoughts were immediately interrupted. He looked towards the fog. It seemed as if an extremely formidable strength was being released from within, forming a shockwave that swept out in all directions. But soon after, a formidable swallowing strength descended. The devouring power descended, and all the rolling clouds that had been blasted away were fiercely pulled back. Then the clouds exploded and scattered without a trace. In the blink of an eye, all that was left was a pitch-black hole that appeared in front of everyone. It was indeed pitch-black and large. This hole was at least 10,000 feet wide and incomparably dark. Looking at it made it seem as if one would be forcefully pulled in. An aura that was coarse and savage, mixed with the endless passage of time, was released from it. It was as if a peak ancient creature had crossed the river of time and opened its eyes. With a single glance, it could see the entire world, and it naturally enveloped everyone in the world. Qin Yu's chest tightened. In the next moment, his heart began to violently beat. A roar sounded out from deep within his mind. His abyssal Titan bloodline began to show signs of erupting uncontrollably. He took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed his racing heartbeat. Qin Yu used a great deal of strength to prevent himself from transforming into an abyssal Titan. He let out a breath of relief and turned his head to meet Song Zhu's eyes. This woman had a sneer on her face, and there were 4 words written on her face. "I've caught you." Qin Yu's first thought was that this woman's senses were quite sharp. Then he wondered if it was too late to silence her now. The good news was that after sneering, Song Zhu looked away and didn't do anything else. Qin Yu hesitated for a moment. Then he decided to temporarily suppress his thoughts. These 2 people weren't people from the Dragon Mountain Holy Lands. They were all outsiders, so it would be best if they minded their own business. Of course, what was more important was that this man and woman, Tanhai and Song Zhu, gave off a feeling that they weren't easy to deal with. Killing someone had never been an easy matter. One had to have a pair of bright eyes. Otherwise, if they chose the wrong target, it would be nothing more than a farce of sending themselves to their deaths. Peach Garden, West Mountain, and the other influences that had first opened the seal took the lead. The first batch of cultivators entered the black hole and vanished. Then it was the turn of the other influences. Yan Ping said in a low voice, "Everyone, you must stick close to the mountain pangolin and seal away your own aura." He looked at Qin Yu. "Junior apprentice brother Qin, especially you. You might feel a bit uncomfortable during the process, but you must endure it. Otherwise there will be problems." Qin Yu thanked him with gratitude. Yan Ping gently smiled and waved his hand, trying his best to maintain an appearance that said he was a warm-hearted person and there was no need to thank him. He glanced around and felt a bit disappointed. Miss Song Zhu didn't seem to be looking at him at all. It must be because of the opening of the Lost Garden. There was no need to worry. There would be more chances in the future. However, if this was the case, then in order to display his noble and pure charisma, he wouldn't be in a hurry to kill Qin Yu. After all, he needed a tool that could help him display his true self. The order of entry was enough to determine their positions. When almost half of the people entered, Yan Ping waved his hand. "Let's go." The mountain pangolin's eyes had already turned red, and its bloodline was restless. It suddenly roared out loud. When the 5 people landed on its body, its 4 thick hooves stomped the ground and it shot forwards. The entire process proceeded smoothly. Besides Tanhai and Song Zhu suddenly tensing up, this couldn't be hidden from everyone's eyes. Long Feng rushed to say, "Miss Song Zhu, there is no need to be afraid. As long as you stick close to the mountain pangolin, there will be no problems." He had the appearance of an experienced Taoist priest, but he didn't realize that this was also his first time entering the Lost Garden. Yan Ping sneered inwardly. Speaking too much was just too shameful. He really didn't think of this playboy Long Feng as his opponent. Chapter 1251. Qin Yu lowered his head, his eyes flashing. Just now he had sensed something strange. He felt as if he had been locked onto by a terrifying pair of eyes. It was very weak. If he hadn't confirmed it with the old turtle, Qin Yu might have suspected that it was an illusion. And it just so happened that Tanhai and Song Zhu suddenly tensed up at this time. Although the two of them reacted quickly, they couldn't help but reveal a trace of panic in their eyes. Qin Yu immediately felt reassured. Since everyone wanted a problem, then the big brother wouldn't laugh at the second brother. If there was no problem, then no one would cause trouble. Thinking for a moment, he lightly coughed. His eyes met Song Zhu's, but his meaning was already transmitted. "I've also caught onto your weakness." Strangely, Song Zhu immediately understood the meaning in Qin Yu's eyes. He immediately clenched his teeth in hatred. This shameless fellow, he was truly sinister. He had actually hidden himself so deeply. "Humph, humph, but you are far too naive. We will soon enter the Lost Garden. At that time, I will let you know just how terrifying a woman's revenge is." They arrived at the black hole. They entered. Qin Yu's consciousness instantly emptied out. This was beyond his expectations. Luckily, no danger arrived. A series of deep and solemn syllables rang out in his mind, like a great bell or a peal of thunder. These syllables were unfamiliar and revealed traces of ancient time. But for some unknown reason, Qin Yu understood their meaning. To sum it up, it could be summarized as, "Welcome home." There was another tremor in his ears. Then, Qin Yu felt his consciousness return to his body. He opened his eyes. Sunlight poured down from above. His eyes felt a stabbing pain and tears began to flow down. He didn't dare to close his eyes. He could only force himself to squint and slowly sweep his eyes around, barely able to make out his surroundings. His first impression was a wild and desolate land. Tall trees that he had never seen before filled his line of sight. Each one was shockingly thick, so thick that it would take dozens of people to wrap their arms around it. The tree trunks were covered with purple vines. Although the leaves were lush, they couldn't hide them. The vines grew spikes that shined with a metallic luster beneath the sunlight. Unlike the purple vine that was huge, flourishing, and slightly sinister, the flower it bloomed with was a type of flower that was as small as a fingernail. There was an incomparably sweet fragrance wafting in the air, and it made one feel at ease with just a single breath, as if they were about to lose themselves in the fragrance. Qin Yu's heart chilled. He quickly held his breath and revolved his strength, completely blocking off his connection to the outside world. But even so, he still felt dizzy and his vision went black. The sound of flapping wings suddenly rang out. It was so dense that it pierced through one's eardrums, causing one's hair to stand on end and the hair on one's back to stand. Raising his head, Zhang Xian saw a wasp flying out from each of the finger-sized purple flowers. Their mouths were wide open as they charged toward the crowd. The man called Ocean Explorer had the worst luck. When the teleportation ended, he appeared closest to the purple vine. He was the first to bear the brunt of the attack. The dark swarm of bees was the first to engulf him. Bang, bang, bang. A series of collisions rang out in the air, rising and falling in succession. It was as if they had suffered a heavy blow, and bees were sent flying one after another. Although he was completely unharmed, Tanhai couldn't help but frown, his eyes revealing shock and solemnity. The defense of these seemingly unremarkable wasps was actually so strong. Even though they were sent flying, they only felt dizzy for a few moments before flapping their wings and rushing over again. As expected of the legendary Lost Garden, it was truly astonishing. But these little things didn't have the qualifications to injure him. With a cold snort, Ocean Explorer lifted a hand and grasped forwards. With a loud rumble, an invisible millstone descended, wildly spinning. Countless wasps were sucked in and instantly crushed into powder. At the same time, Qin Yu and the other three were also surrounded by the wasps. Now, the most relaxed one was the mountain pangolin. It hugged its head and curled up together. A black light flashed on the surface of its body, and it actually completed a transformation that was close to metal. No matter how the wasps surrounded it and wreaked havoc, they couldn't hurt it in the slightest. They had just arrived and hadn't even opened their eyes, yet they had already encountered danger. Don't underestimate the current situation. Although the buzzing wasps that surrounded them seemed to have been slaughtered, the ones who did this were no ordinary people. Even though Qin Yu, who had impersonated someone else, looked the weakest on the surface, his performance was far stronger than an ordinary cultivator's. In this situation, one had to be at least at the original divinity realm in order to resist the attacks of the wasps. If they rushed in, they would be torn to pieces in the blink of an eye. And from what they could see, this was only an appetizer for the lost garden. The wasps that flew out from the purple flowers not only had strong defenses, but their vitality was also astonishingly strong. Only by completely crushing them could they be truly killed. Otherwise, even if their heads were chopped off or their bodies were split in half, they would still be alive and kicking, full of killing power. Wisps of purple energy filled the air. These were the corpses of the wasps that evaporated under the scorching sun. There didn't seem to be anything wrong with them. At the very least, they hadn't caused any substantial harm to the group yet. But Qin Yu couldn't help but furrow his eyebrows. This was because as time passed, even though they had killed a massive number of wasps, their numbers didn't decrease at all. Rather, they seemed to be increasing in number. Looking at the purple energy in the air, Qin Yu's intuition told him that the more wasps there were, the more they were attracted to it. Before he was surrounded by a massive number of wasps, Qin Yu could see thick and dense forest trees, as well as purple vines climbing up each tree. If there were wasps hidden in the flowers of these purple vines, then they had really poked a giant beehive. He had to break out of this encirclement as soon as possible. Otherwise, if things continued like this, he would be exhausted to death before he could kill all these wasps. Was he still going to act? If he was by himself, Qin Yu was confident he could break out of here. But doing so would definitely arouse suspicions. After all, the strength needed to break out was not something he could possess with his current status. No matter what, if they were suspicious, then they would be suspicious. As long as they couldn't confirm his identity, then it wasn't a big deal. He had borrowed the Dragon Mountain Holy Lands to quietly enter the Lost Garden. Now he had achieved his goal. As Qin Yu moved his feet and prepared to leave, the incomparably dense sounds of flapping wings suddenly weakened in his ears. It was sudden, without any warning. Qin Yu was stunned for a moment before the dense swarm of wasps faded away. Then, in several breaths of time, all the wasps retreated, drilling back into the purple flowers and vanishing from sight. Everyone gasped for breath, their eyebrows furrowed together. If it weren't for the thick pile of wasps' corpses on the ground, they would have suspected that what they saw just now was an illusion. Pa! 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 A light sound entered his ears, and Qin Yu's complexion changed. He saw that on the purple vines, the flowers that had been blooming just a moment ago had suddenly folded back into buds, and then retracted back into the dense leaves. Walala! There was the sound of swaying and rubbing. The purple vines on the great tree began to tighten, entangling themselves more tightly. Sea Explorer shouted, "Be careful!" Long Feng subconsciously shrank his head and hid behind Yanping. His eyes twitched, but he still protected Yanping. Unless he didn't want to stay in the Dragon Mountain Holy Lands anymore, he couldn't allow anything to happen to Long Feng. There was silence. The people who were waiting in formation did not see anything. Suddenly, there was a rustling sound. This was the sound of the lush leaves of the great tree and the purple vines gently rubbing against each other. The wind was rising. It wasn't strong. Beneath the blazing hot sunlight, it actually brought with it a comfortable coolness. But at this time, Qin Yu's pupils shrank. He looked up into the distant horizon. There was an abnormal darkness there, one that was filled with a repressive and cruel atmosphere. Without hesitation, he took a step forward and his figure exploded outwards. Unfortunately, although Qin Yu's reaction was fast and his speed was fast, the darkness in the distant horizon was even faster. Rumble, rumble. There was a deep roar, and the world seemed to tremble. A clear suction force covered Qin Yu. Inevitably, he began to slow down, and helplessness appeared in his eyes. He had many cards in his hands, but when it came to running away, he seemed to be lacking. As Qin Yu was hesitating about whether or not he should use his cards and try to escape, he saw a trace of darkness in front of him and decisively dispelled this thought. This wasn't a pursuit from behind, but a four-sided encirclement. He had already become a fish in a net, so there was no need to waste any more effort. He had to save some energy and face the torment that awaited him. Shwa! Qin Yu's figure stopped. In the next moment, he was like a common-looking pebble that was instantly swallowed up by the darkness. A heaven-shaking explosion rumbled in his ears. Qin Yu's mind roared and his chest tightened as if he couldn't breathe. A formidable tearing strength wrapped around his entire body. It was like thousands of hands were grasping outwards and tearing him apart. Pipa! Pipa! His skin cracked apart and countless wounds appeared, revealing dark red flesh and blood. The bones hidden deep within began to emit pained groans. With a loud shout, Qin Yu's heart raced, pushing the power of his blood vitality to rapidly revolve. The wounds on his body instantly healed. At the same time, the power of space erupted, wrapping around him. The Lost Garden was indeed a place that was nearly isolated from the outside world, a place that had been forgotten by time. Even the rules here were different. No, to say that the rules were different was a bit inappropriate. To be more precise, in the Lost Garden, controlling the rules here required a greater amount of strength. With Qin Yu's understanding of the Tao of space, he was only able to barely distort space. He was unable to completely resist the power of the storm outside. Fortunately, the remaining portion couldn't cause any substantial damage to Qin Yu. Well, it didn't seem too dangerous. As this thought flashed through his mind, Qin Yu's complexion changed. His figure flickered to the side, crossing paths with a black shadow. The two of them were extremely close, nearly touching each other's noses, only missing each other by a hair's breadth. So close that Qin Yu could clearly smell the incomparably thick and nauseating smell of blood coming from the other party's body. Qin Yu's ears caught a faint sound. The black shadow that he had just avoided leapt forwards once more. This time, Qin Yu was finally able to clearly see the other party's appearance. It was a strange beast with wings on its back that resembled a praying mantis. However, its size was astonishing. It was larger than a normal adult. Its compound eyes flashed with a blood-red light, and its pitch-black forelimbs were raised like sabers. Chapter 1252. So there was something even more terrifying hidden within the black storm. No wonder the wasps had fled so quickly, abandoning the prey that was right in front of them. This was the first thought that popped up in Qin Yu's mind when he saw the mantis-like beast. To be more precise, it was a clear intuition. This two-saber-wielding beast in front of him was extremely difficult to deal with. Reality proved that Qin Yu's vision was correct. With a light ripping sound, a clean cut appeared on his black robes. Blood seeped out, accompanied by a faint numbing feeling. Poison! Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows. Even with the toughness of his body, he found it hard to resist. This poison was tyrannical and fierce, it could be imagined. Luckily, he hadn't been afraid of poison for many years. With a thought, the numbing feeling gradually began to dissipate. But on the surface, Qin Yu's complexion became increasingly ugly. His eyebrows furrowed and his eyes revealed a trace of panic. Across from him, the mantis-like beast's eyes surged with a blood-red light. The ominous light in its eyes became even brighter. This thing really did have a spiritual intelligence. In other words, Qin Yu's performance just now wasn't for the blind to see. with a spiritual intelligence and fierce strength, it was certainly more difficult to deal with. But on the other hand, sometimes the smarter one was the faster one died. Because it was confident in itself, it didn't realize that the prey it had chosen had already decided to kill it from the start and had already begun to do so. The black storm was like its home. It didn't affect the cockroach-like beast at all. It flapped the wings on its back, coming and going like the wind, cruel and ruthless. A pair of pitch-black forelimbs seemed to fuse into the black storm, increasing its speed. It came and went without a trace, so fast that it left one's heart racing. Qin Yu tried his best to dodge, but more and more wounds appeared on his body. His face was gradually covered with a dark haze, and he gasped for breath. The blood that stained his robes gradually turned black, emitting a sour smell. The mantis-like beast revealed a dignified look in its blood-red eyes. This common-looking human in front of it actually had such strength. But in the black storm, even if he had the strength to fight a dragon, he couldn't display it at all. He could only be slowly ground to death. It was about time. The poison had invaded his marrow and blood vessels, and this person had reached his limit. It was time to give him a fatal strike and end the hunt. The two sharp forelimbs rubbed against each other, producing sparks. This was a subconscious action of the mantis race when they were excited. It already had a premonition that this prey must be very delicious. Eating him might even help it break through its limits and increase its strength to a higher level. At this moment, Qin Yu muttered to himself. He was almost done with his acting. If this mantis beast still didn't act, he would really be poisoned. After all, compared to being poisoned, detoxification was always slower. The more wounds there were, the more toxins would accumulate in the body, and after a long time, it would definitely affect the body. The sudden vibrations of the wings were like a taut bowstring that was suddenly released. The sound made by the small, high-speed vibrations could be heard. The mantis beast pounced over. Its speed was faster than before, and its blade was also faster. Qin Yu thought to himself, what a coincidence. So you were also hiding your strength. As an ancient beast, how could you be so sinister? But unfortunately, when it came to the word sinister, the dignified human race was not afraid of anyone. With a thought, he gathered the power of space into a single point and erupted with all his strength. After losing his protection, the rotting wounds on Qin Yu's body began to split open. Flesh flew out and blood wildly gushed out. His complexion instantly paled. But after paying this price, the mantis beast was like an arrow released from a bow. The rapidly approaching mantis beast suddenly paused for a moment. It seemed to feel an intense crisis. With a sharp cry, its wings flapped and its speed rose once more. Peepa, peepa. Small cracking sounds spread out from its body. This was the sound of the space imprisonment rapidly collapsing. After acting for a long time, Qin Yu had finally found a chance. He certainly wouldn't give it another chance to escape. But sometimes, no matter how good a plan was, it couldn't keep up with changes. Qin Yu lifted his hand, and a silver moon appeared behind him. Just as he was about to cut down, a figure rushed out from the black storm, crashing into him. Qin Yu's sword almost cut down. At the last moment, he forcefully pulled it back. He stuffily coughed again and again. The first sound was when the silver moon's sword intent was forcefully interrupted. The second sound was when he was struck. Didn't this woman look where she was going? She knew she was going to crash into him, and yet she didn't slow down. Qin Yu was infuriated. He lowered his head to meet Song Zhu's eyes. Her face was pale, and her eyes were filled with panic. She had lost all of her previous momentum and was now like a timid cat. Bang! The space imprisonment was broken. Qin Yu looked up at the two mantis beasts in front of him. He couldn't help but sigh. This was troublesome. It was already difficult to kill one, much less two. Moreover, he had already suffered a loss, so it would be even more difficult to scheme against them. The thought of turning around and running away appeared in his mind, but he immediately pressed it down. He really couldn't run away. Within the black storm, the mantis beasts were as relaxed as eating and drinking. Even if he vomited blood, he still couldn't outrun them. If he couldn't run, then he could only go all out. Looking at the two mantis beasts, the blood-red light and the ominous light in their eyes, Chinyu felt that the chances of them resolving this enmity with a smile were far too small. "Is there any way to deal with the trouble you brought?" Chinyu asked with a frown. Songju shook her head in panic. If she had a way, why would she be chased around in such a panic? Chinyu coldly sneered. "Then I'm sorry. I can only run by myself. I hope that these two will be busy eating meat and won't chase me." Songju's face paled. In her opinion, Chinyu was an extremely cunning and deeply hidden character. There was no doubt that he would do something like this. She subconsciously hugged Chinyu tightly and shook her head, tears flowing down her cheeks. Her previous judgment seemed to have been a bit off. Although it wasn't particularly large, it was still a bit large. Bah! What time was it, and she still had the mind to think about such things? What kind of bug had taken over her brain? Chinyu gathered his thoughts and sighed inwardly. She had been scared to tears. It was clear that there really was no other way. In truth, this was different from what he had expected. He had clearly thought that she and Tanhai wouldn't be easy to deal with. Indeed, men were bitter. In a critical moment, they had to rely on themselves to go all out. Although the taste of a warm and fragrant jade was quite good, Chinyu wasn't in the mood to enjoy such things right now. He reached out and grabbed Songju. Beneath her wide and panic-stricken eyes, Chinyu threw her far away. He muttered, "Stupid woman, if you don't hurry up and run, are you waiting to die?" As he spoke, he rushed forwards. Since he couldn't scheme against them, he could only brace himself and attack first. At least he would be able to take the initiative. Hum! Hum! There was the sound of flapping wings. Two mantis beasts rushed forwards. As he thought, these two bastards' first target was her. Chinyu had already guessed this, but he had just verified it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have thrown Songju away just now. As for having tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex, he really didn't think too much about it. If she could cook up a decent meal and buy him some time, he would definitely turn tail and run. Bang! A heaven-shaking explosion erupted from the black storm. The black storm erupted, forming a shockwave that sent Songju, who had yet to stabilize himself, flying again. After tumbling around for some time, the pale Songju bit down on her lips. She looked at the area where the terrifying shockwaves had erupted from. That person was fighting two mantis beasts alone. He was indeed strong, stronger than she had imagined. But the environment of the black storm was too poor. Could he survive? Songju didn't know. She felt that she had misjudged this person. He wasn't as cunning or annoying as he seemed. Taking a deep breath, Songju turned and left. She had to find Tanhai as soon as possible. Most of her strength had been sealed away, and she didn't have the strength to protect herself. Of course, there was also a hidden thought in her heart. After she found Tanhai, she might be able to save Chinyu's life. Whoosh! Songju vanished in the black storm. Within the Lost Garden, the black storm wreaked havoc wherever it went. After sweeping away countless prey, it finally went far away. The earth cracked, the mountain peaks shattered, the rivers dried up, heaven-reaching trees were forcefully pulled out from the earth. Most of their roots were exposed, and countless branches were broken. Some of the more unlucky ones only had giant pits left where they stood. And now, Chinyu was lying in one of these incomparably large pits. His face was pale, and he bitterly smiled. Although he knew that the Lost Garden was dangerous, he never imagined that before he entered, he would be struck by a hammer before he could even find his footing. That woman Songju was a jinx. If it weren't for her, Chinyu would have already killed her and run away. He wouldn't have fallen to his current fate, lying in a pit of mud, gasping for breath. Moreover, although I pushed you away, you shouldn't have turned around and disappeared without a trace. Ha, woman! Chinyu held his breath. He thought that it was best if he didn't see her again. Otherwise, he wanted to ask her, how would he repay her for saving his life? She was too young. He wasn't interested in her at all. He angrily thought in his heart. His thoughts were all over the place, but they were able to alleviate the restlessness in his heart and pass the time. Qin Yu had already been lying there for almost 2 hours. His injuries were extremely heavy. In simpler terms, he was like a clay figurine that had been randomly glued together after being smashed to pieces. Moreover, he hadn't put much effort into sticking them together. As long as he shook them a little, they would shatter and scatter to the ground. Of course, if it were just 2 mantis beasts, they would have been tricky to deal with, but they wouldn't have ended up in such a miserable state. But they had actually been so shameless. 2 against 1 wasn't enough, and they had even called for help. Luckily, Qin Yu's resistance to beatings was high enough that he was just barely able to preserve his life. The black storm had just passed. After the Lost Garden was ravaged and smashed, there was a rare period of peace. This gave Qin Yu a chance to catch his breath. A moment later, he let out a long breath. His body had finally recovered the ability to move. Blinking his eyes, Qin Yu tried to stand up. He placed his palms on the ground and slowly exerted strength. Gotcha! His first thought was, fuck, this is bad, his arm is broken. Then he discovered that it wasn't his arm that was broken, but where his hand was pressing down. It was like a dead branch had been crushed. What was that smell? Qin Yu let out a sigh of relief. He looked down at the place his palm was pressing down on. Faint traces of translucent green liquid began to gush out. Qin Yu was stunned. What was this? Was this a carrot after a slap? Do I look like such a spineless person? If you give it to me, then yes, that's right, I'm that sort of person. Why am I still pretending in this situation? If I don't hurry up and go in, then I'll die. Chapter 1253. The Source of Life. As Qin Yu smelled the scent and saw the light green liquid seeping out, he immediately determined what it was. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was overjoyed. Otherwise, with his current condition, even if he regained his ability to move, his chances of surviving in the Lost Garden wouldn't be high. The scent spread through the air. One didn't need to be a genius to know that it would soon attract nearby life forms, whether it was cultivators or natives of the Lost Garden. This wasn't a result that Qin Yu wanted to see. Don't just stand there. Use your hands and feet, open the hole and hurry in. The source of life in the Lost Garden had an automatic sealing ability. As long as a life form entered, it would automatically seal itself. To Qin Yu, this was a lifesaver. Gotcha! This time the bone really broke. There was nothing he could do about it. It had just barely grown back and hadn't grown solid yet. Gotcha! It broke again. Qin Yu frowned, but his movements didn't stop. With a gotcha, a hole appeared in front of him. What entered his eyes was a sparkling green liquid. According to the records in the jade slip, the grade of this source of life wasn't too good. But at this time, there was no point in being picky. It was good enough that it was useful. Qin Yu flipped over, and with a thud he drilled in. The light green liquid instantly erupted with light, as if it had been activated. The surface rapidly froze, forming a layer of ice. The scent in the air rapidly dissipated. In the next moment, just as this layer of ice formed, the earth began to rumble. In the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of Qin Yu. It was a horned monkey holding a stone staff. Staring at the layer of ice, it emitted an enraged roar. It lifted the stone staff and smashed down with the force of 10,000 caddies. With a heaven-shaking explosion, the stone staff flew out of the monkey's hand, and its entire palm was torn apart by the shaking force. Blood dripped down, but the layer of ice didn't even move. There wasn't even a white mark on it. With a pained roar, the monkey gasped for breath. Then it turned its head to retrieve its stone staff and sat down outside the pit. It wanted to wait here for the fellow inside to come out. Then it would smash its head open and swallow it into its stomach. After entering the source of life, Qin, you certainly didn't know that outside. there was a large monkey holding a stone staff that wanted to smash his head open, waiting for him to come out. Now he felt really good. Although he had already gained a rough understanding of the source of life through the records in the jade slip, it was only after entering it that he realized that there was a limit to what words could describe. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't replicate what he truly felt. Being in the source of life, Zhang Xian's breathing wasn't restricted at all, and with every breath he took, a warm and gentle energy continuously flowed into his body through his pores. His severely injured body was recovering at an astonishing speed. He could almost hear the sound of broken bones and flesh rapidly growing back. At the same time, his soul felt like it was soaking in a hot spring. His lazy thoughts didn't want to move, but he could clearly feel that his fatigue was rapidly disappearing and his strength was rising. As expected, the source of life was truly a perfect tonic soup. Now, Qin Yu felt that this analogy was far too vivid and accurate. And this was only a source of life that wasn't of a very high quality. If he could find a dark green source of life, or even the legendary purple source of life, what would it feel like? He wouldn't explode from the energy that had entered his body, would he? But thinking about it, as a cultivator, if he could be stuffed to death by the power fused into his body, he would probably die. He would probably be very happy. He had just come back to life, so he shouldn't think about dying here and there. At the very least, Qin Yu had obtained a blessing in disguise. Was Hidden Pearl a jinx? Qin Yu hesitated. If it weren't for her, he definitely wouldn't have found this source of life. Whatever, he would just consider this as interest from her for saving his life. That jinx was still a jinx, and a relatively small one at that. In his lazy state, Qin Yu's thoughts were all over the place, all sorts of unreliable thoughts running through his mind. The old turtle's voice suddenly sounded out. "Master, although I think that a man who is covered in scars and survives after experiencing danger does indeed have the qualifications to enjoy a period of peace and tranquility. But such a good cultivation opportunity, if we use it for random thoughts, it would be a bit of a waste." A waste? Qin Yu hesitated for a moment. Should he pretend that he didn't hear it? After all, the first half of the old turtle's words were quite reasonable. The source of life's ability to disintegrate a person's will was indeed strong. He had to resist it. He couldn't fall like this. Clenching his teeth, Qin Yu slowly and clearly said, "What cultivation opportunity? Speak." The old turtle coughed. "Master, there are other secrets hidden on your body. Where did the divine seal come from? Go and find it. I don't think there will be a time when it comes to perceiving the rules of the world faster than right now. Moreover, I can help you. I've been eating so much recently that I'm a bit full and need time to digest." His last words revealed a trace of sorrow and sorrow. First, he never thought that there would be a time when he would forcefully eat too much and nearly explode. Second, as someone who stood at the peak of the death-fearing world, he actually had to actively consume the strength to maintain his life. This was simply too hard to accept. Qin Yu struggled to resist his own laziness. How could he be in the mood to ponder over the old turtle's current mood fluctuations? He was only slightly surprised for a moment before he discovered the existence of the stone pagoda. But in this state, he was too lazy to think about it. Qin Yu's thoughts stirred, and he began to call out to the stone pagoda's consciousness. Once, there was no response. Twice, there was no response. 3 times, there was no response. Qin Yu's first thought was, did this fellow explode? You're the one who exploded. The stone pagoda's voice was filled with anger. As the one who helped you condense the Galaxy Divine Seal, you ignored me first and then slandered me for no reason. How could I not throw a little tantrum? It's impossible for me to agree just because you called me. Now, you should be able to sense that I am angry for my tone and reaction. Very good. Then prepare to think of a way to comfort me and obtain my forgiveness. Humph, humph, I'll tell you the truth. This pagoda has a great temper, and it's hard to coax him. Are you ready to cry your heart out? Qin Yu wasn't ready, and he didn't think he had done anything wrong. In his lazy state, his mind was a bit slow. It took him a moment to regain his composure. His first reaction was that this fellow was too bold. Didn't he remember who it was that had been scared and coaxed by him in the past? Moreover, just look at this old turtle. His status and background were greater than the heavens, yet he still behaved himself. In comparison, the stone pagoda was far too excessive. Qin Yu quietly said, "I think you really want to explode." In the darkness, a certain pagoda that had suffered alone for countless years nearly cried. It thought to itself, "Oh heavens and earth! Just what did I do wrong to have such a master that makes me feel such sorrow and despair?" Qin, you didn't give it more time to cry out in sorrow. He sighed at the unfairness of fate. "Tell me, how should I cultivate now? Otherwise, you can shut your mouth forever." The stone pagoda was terrified. There was nothing he could do about it. Right now, Qin Yu was the master and it was the subordinate. And most importantly, this contract was signed by it on its own initiative. There was no way it could resist. If it really angered Qin Yu, a single thought from him could cause the stone pagoda to explode, but it would be easy to freeze it. It had finally seen the light of day with great difficulty, and even had a chance to recover. How could it be willing to go back to those dark days? It was too difficult for me. The stone pagoda didn't know that the old turtle had similar thoughts not too long ago. Otherwise, it would have considered him a friend. "Master, I can already clearly sense your current condition. The effects of entering the trial field of the rules are indeed excellent, cough cough. But maintaining the operation of the trial field requires a great deal of strength. I haven't recovered yet, so I need Master to provide me with some." Qin Yu said, "Speak simply and get to the point." The stone pagoda vowed that one day in the future, if it became a master, it would definitely let Qin Yu know what it meant to be alive. He had already said the key points, so what else did it want to hear? "Master, I will take a portion of the strength that you have absorbed so that I can open the trial field of the rules." Qin, you didn't even need to think about it. No, he didn't even have enough of the perfect supplement soup for himself, so he certainly wasn't willing to take it out. The stone pagoda cried. This was the typical behavior of a bully who wanted a cow to work, but also wanted the cow to not eat grass. Even if the stone pagoda died, it wouldn't be able to maintain the opening of the trial field in its current condition. Luckily, this deadlock didn't continue for too long before it was broken by the old turtle. It indicated that it could resolve this matter. The old turtle solution was very simple. Where was this place? This was the ancient lost garden that was maintained in its original state. Everything else was lacking, but it didn't lack that bit of energy between the heavens and earth. And all he needed to do was connect a string and pull a pipe to borrow a bit of it. Of course, saying it 10,000 times wasn't as good as doing it well. The old turtle had succeeded. It was true that maintaining the trial field of the rules consumed a great deal of energy, but within the scope of the entire lost garden, it was only a drop in the ocean, almost negligible. His field of vision darkened. When he regained consciousness, Qin Yu discovered that he had returned to the God-forbidding gorge. Everything was the same as before, except that there was no one else here besides him. Xiang Shui. Things had been a bit messy. He had left her at the Eastern Zhou family, and as soon as he left, there had been no news of her. But thinking about it, with Eastern Zhou Jilly here, she shouldn't have suffered any grievances. And now, Qin Yu's name had spread throughout the world. With the strength of the Eastern Zhou family, it wouldn't be difficult to determine his identity, and it was even more impossible for her to be wronged. But even so, once the matters of the Lost Garden were over, he would have to make a trip there and see whether or not she was willing to live in the peach garden. As Qin Yu's thoughts raced, the stone pagoda's voice sounded out. "Master, if you need it, women are also possible. You just need to expend a bit more energy, and you can create an exact replica. A true replica. No matter what you do, it won't be a problem." Its tone was filled with confidence. Qin Yu immediately froze. His face darkened as he clenched his teeth. Could it be that this was the impression he had in the stone pagoda's heart? And you say it won't be a problem? What do you want me to do? If it weren't for the fact that I needed you to continue running around and maintaining the trial field of the rules, I would have immediately taught you what the consequences of speaking such a big mouth are. You can sense my thoughts. The stone pagoda cautiously said, just a little. Not even a little. Yes. Chapter 1254. Qin Yu finally knew why the old turtle had said that this was an excellent opportunity to cultivate. To be able to obtain a massive amount of free strength to maintain the operation of the trial field of rules was certainly a part of the reason. But more importantly, Qin Yu discovered that because of the existence of his source of life, the speed at which he perceived the rules was terrifyingly fast. This was confirmed after he asked the old turtle for confirmation. The source of life was a lucky chance born from the world of the Lost Garden. By staying here, one could obtain a bit of the blessing of the Lost Garden's will. Or, to be more precise, it was the will left behind by a powerful ancient life form that had created this place in the distant past. According to the old turtle, this was an obsession. As long as one could obtain the approval of the Lost Garden, they would be able to obtain a blessing in their cultivation. Perceiving the rules of the world to accelerate was only one of them. It just so happened to be the most suitable for Qin Yu. He had already stepped onto the road of true divinity, and there was no way he could turn back. So what was there to hesitate about? He would cultivate. Besides being separated from Sea Explorer at the start, Sangju's luck had been quite good. It didn't take long for her to find him. But at the time, Sea Explorer's situation wasn't too good. Afterwards, for some unknown reason, the mantis beasts chasing them retreated on their own initiative. Looking at Sea Explorer's tired face that he was trying his best to squeeze out a smile, Sangju couldn't bring herself to say the words she wanted to say. Afterwards, the black storm swept through. She pulled Sea Explorer back to look for him, but in the end they didn't find anything. Sea Explorer asked her what she was looking for. Sangju shook her head, not saying anything. If that fellow didn't die, she would repay him when they met again in the future. But if he died, there was no difference between saying anything and not saying anything. Sangju, we should go. Sea Explorer closed the jade plate in his hands and said in a soft voice. He looked at her and frowned, a bit of worry in his eyes. Even after the great changes in the past, she wasn't like this. Sea Explorer really wanted to know just what had happened in the black storm while they were separated. But this cousin of Sangju's, although she didn't seem like much on the surface, the truth was that she was someone with her own ideas. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been forced to accompany her on this crazy adventure. She didn't want to say anything more. It was useless to ask. Sangju's eyelashes trembled. She pressed them down slightly and opened them again. She took one last look behind her and stood up. Let's go. The two of them headed towards a certain place in the Lost Garden. If one were to lock onto them from a high altitude, they would discover that although there were some twists and turns along the way, when scaled down, they were basically traveling in a straight line. It was as if they knew exactly where they should go next. Eldest senior brother stood in front of the carcass of a giant beast and stretched out his hand to gently touch it. The surface of its body was crystal clear, as if it was carved out of crystal, and the patterns of its scales were revealed in his eyes. There was a hint of admiration and pity in his eyes. To be able to traverse the river of time and encounter this ancient creature that only existed in the records of history, how fortunate was he? Unfortunately, the situation today was different, and the creatures in the Lost Garden could not be brought out, so they could only be killed. After thinking for a while, eldest senior brother took out a small knife and started to peel off the armor. The knife looked very ordinary, but it was very dexterous in eldest senior brother's hands. It sank into the gap between the scales, and with a gentle turn and flick, a complete scale flew out and was caught by his other hand. Lei Xiaoyu walked over, a smile on her face. What is eldest senior brother doing? Without turning his head, eldest senior brother said, Junior brother has cultivated the true divinity path and comprehended the rules of the world is his foundation. These scale patterns are the manifestation of the rules. If we bring them back, they might help him cultivate. Lei Xiaoyu's eyes flashed. She didn't say anything. She simply turned and looked at a giant green crystal on the ground. It was a deep color, almost green to the extreme, like a dazzling piece of jade. Eldest senior brother, the azure dragon, has yet to mature. Isn't this source of life a bit too much? If it can't eat it, it might be in danger. Eldest senior brother stopped and turned around. He smiled. I understand junior apprentice sister's meaning, but Honorable Master said that the azure dragon's talent is extraordinary. The lost garden may be a lucky chance for us, but for it, it might be a heaven-defying stroke of good fortune. So, we must temporarily endure it. Junior apprentice sister, do you understand? Lei Xiaoyu nodded. I understand. Since this is Honorable Master's meaning, just pretend I didn't say anything. Eldest senior brother, continue. I'm too lazy to move, so I won't help you peel it. She turned and walked away. Eldest senior brother revealed a helpless expression. Junior apprentice sister was indeed dissatisfied, but he already understood her temperament, so he wasn't angry. It was just that the words peel it weren't too pleasant to hear. The warmth that he used to care for his junior apprentice brother's cultivation had been completely destroyed. With a smile, eldest senior brother turned and continued. If she wanted to say something, then say it. Have you found them yet? Trash. Think of a way to find them as soon as possible. We cannot allow that woman to undo the seal in her body. If you can't do this well, then prepare yourself to stay here forever. Whoosh, whoosh, with the sound of breaking air, over a dozen figures howled into the distance. The black-robed man frowned. His hands were held behind his back, and from within his sleeves, tiny sounds emitted out. It was like the sound of bones cracking, but also like iron and stone colliding. Hidden Pearl, you cannot escape. This is your fate. It was decided from the day you were born. The large monkey had an impatient personality. Although it had been waiting for 100 claws to scratch its heart, it still forced itself to wait here. It was just one step away, just one step away. The source of life was its. Moreover, it was something that belonged to it to begin with. Many years ago, the large monkey had discovered the secret hidden in the roots of the great tree. But at that time, the source of life had just formed and its usefulness was limited. The large monkey hesitated again and again. In the end, it decided to wait. Like this, it waited for many years. There were several times when it almost couldn't bear it any longer. It wanted the source of life to absorb more strength so that its quality could become higher. Finally, not too long ago, the large monkey deliberately stirred up a dispute and forced several of its enemies to flee, preparing to enjoy the sumptuous meal it had been waiting for. But just as the battle ended and before it could return, the black storm arrived. The large monkey desperately tried to prevent itself from being swept away. With great difficulty, the large monkey waited until the black storm passed through. It didn't dare to delay for even a minute, but in the end a problem occurred. When it smelled the scent of the source of life in the air, it nearly went insane. Thus, even though it knew that the seal on life couldn't be broken, it still couldn't help but attack in a fit of rage. Because of this, one of its furry claws was shaken until it was dripping with blood. Wait, no matter how long it took, it had to catch this bastard and eat him up from head to toe. My source of life is mine. If you take it away, then I'll eat you. Of course. The reason the large monkey dared to make this decision was because it hadn't felt the slightest aura of a powerful life. The living environment of ancient life forms was far more dangerous than it was today. To be able to live for so many years and become the overlord of the surrounding area, the large monkey's keen senses could be said to have played a great role in protecting this source of life. At least it had this much confidence. Kacha! A light sound entered its ears. The large monkey's ears perked up and it stood up. It lifted the stick in its hand, but during this entire process, it didn't make the slightest sound. Its icy cold and cruel eyes were filled with excitement. It thought, "You're out, you've finally come out. This monkey brother's stick is hungry and thirsty." More cracks appeared on the layer of ice in front of it. Then, with more light sounds, the cracks spread outwards like a spider web. Bang! It shattered in all directions. The large monkey roared out loud. It stood still in midair and smashed its stick down like a bolt of lightning. It was truly cruel and ruthless, its momentum shocking the heavens and causing a series of explosions to ring out in the air. But the moment the stone stick fell into the deep pit, it was like someone had pressed a pause button. The large monkey froze where it was. The stone stick had completed a transition between extreme movement and extreme stillness. Perhaps my aura really isn't compatible with the Lost Garden. Otherwise, why is it that every time it doesn't even give me time to catch my breath and instead attacks me head-on? With a sigh, Chinyu walked out. He glanced at the frozen, large monkey, and a bit of helplessness appeared on his face. But there was joy in his eyes. This was truly worthy of being called the true divinity path. As long as there were enough rules, they would even dare to fight the heavens and earth. The speed at which their strength rose was simply like they had opened a cheat. To be more precise, to be extravagant enough to use the trial field of the rules to cultivate, it was no different from cheating. Humph, humph, cheating was cheating. The only thing that mattered was increasing one's strength. Everything else was useless. Moreover, this sort of cheating method wasn't something that just anyone could use. If you coveted it, go ahead and try. That's right, that's how it was. Feeling carefree and comfortable. Chinyu snapped his fingers, and the large monkey that had been frozen in space instantly disintegrated. The smell of blood assailed the senses. At this time, Chinyu's eyes flashed. With a thought, a swarm of ants appeared in front of him. These were the purple-back blue-wing ants that had retreated behind the scenes for a long time. To say that they were easy to beat up was because Chinyu's strength had risen far too quickly. If the opponent was too strong, the ants would simply come to their deaths. For instance, just by appearing in the Lost Garden, these once incomparably ferocious purple-back blue-wing ants that had killed countless enemies were flapping their wings in chaos and on the verge of collapse. It had to be known that this place was nearly completely preserved from ancient times. Countless formidable life forms lived here, and the wild aura that was naturally released covered every inch of the land. It wasn't something that they could withstand. Chinyu flicked his sleeves, and space twisted, isolating the wild aura outside. Only then did the purple-back blue-wing ants barely manage to stabilize themselves. Without needing to be urged, the ant swarm turned and threw themselves onto the ground, covering the broken corpse of the large monkey. There was a scalp-numbing sound of chewing. Their speed was extremely fast. When the ant swarm flew up once more, there was only a pale white skeleton left on the ground, without even the tiniest bit of blood. As for the purple-back blue-wing ants, their bellies were round and swaying as they flew. It was clear that they had eaten too much. Luckily, their auras were stable. You carefully sensed that there was nothing wrong with them, so he put them away. It had to be said that these purple-back blue-wing ants had followed Chinyu ever since he was weak, so they certainly had feelings for him. If he could help them rapidly increase their strength in the Lost Garden, that would be for the best. But as for the specifics, that would depend on their digestion speed. If a large monkey could eat too much, then there was no point in thinking about anything else. Chinyu swept his eyes around. Then his feet fell, and he rapidly flew away. While he was absorbing the source of life and cultivating in the trial field of rules, the old turtle wasn't idling around. So now, Chinyu had a goal. Chapter 1255. When he was separated in the Black Storm, Chinyu never thought he would be able to meet Cliff Ping and Dragon Peak again. But fate was mysterious. In the vast Lost Garden, they were reunited once more. The moment their eyes met, Chinyu was surprised. But looking at their expressions, it was clear that Cliff Ping and Dragon Peak didn't think he would be able to survive the black storm. But soon, the two of them adjusted their expressions. Cliff Ping coughed. The first to speak was Dragon Peak. Junior Apprentice Brother Chin, did you see Sea Explorer and Hidden Pearl? With just a few words, Chin knew that this person was still thinking about that small and beautiful Jinx, disregarding everything else. Just this eyesight alone would cause him to die sooner or later. At this moment, Chin hesitated. He already had a goal, so he shouldn't waste any more time. Or should he just kill the two of them? In any case, the Dragon Mountain Holy Lands and Peach Garden were enemies, so he didn't feel any psychological burden doing so. There were certainly advantages. Once these two people died, besides Sea Explorer and Hidden Pearl, no one else would know of Chin Yu's existence. It would be safer and more hidden. As his thoughts raced, he subconsciously responded, "I didn't see them." As he spoke, his expression changed from surprise to joy, almost seamlessly. Chin Yu was stunned. He hadn't thought of doing this at all, but he had subconsciously done it, as he thought acting was addictive. No, my goal is to find more sources of life, not to become a successful actor. Since he had already strayed off the path, he had to decisively turn it back. He would start by killing these two fellows in front of him and use their blood as a sacrifice to the flag. Cliff Ping and Dragon Peak had disappointed expressions. They never thought that Chin Yu would already consider which of them he would kill first. After obtaining a negative response, Dragon Peak's interest in Chin Yu plummeted. His face drooped, as if he didn't want to answer. He turned his head and said, "That person from Peach Garden should be arriving soon. Senior Apprentice Brother, let's hurry over." Chin Yu's hands paused in his sleeves, a puzzled look on his face. Cliff Ping coughed. "Junior Apprentice Brother Chin, you came at the right time. There is something I need your help with." He suddenly thought of an even better idea. Not only could he kill them without leaving any traces, but he might even be able to shake off the blame on himself. After all, that was the Peach Garden. Although there was no saint path in the Lost Garden, as long as something happened, it would be difficult to erase it. True saint of the Permethar realm, it's better to be more careful in the end. While speaking, Yen Ping gave Long Feng a look. Although Long Feng didn't really understand what Yen Ping meant, he was smart enough to keep his mouth shut. "It's nothing important. Let's talk as we walk. Junior Apprentice Brother Chin, hurry up." Yen Ping pulled Chin Yu with a hand and smiled warmly and brightly. Then, on the road, he rambled on about a great deal of things. Although he was vague, Chin Yu was able to speculate a few things. It seemed like some of the people in the Lost Garden had discovered the traces of a certain disciple of the Peach Blossom Garden and were preparing to join hands. Like the Dragon Mountain Holy Land, they were standing on the opposite side of the Peach Garden. But this reason alone was clearly not enough. There would be plenty of opportunities to seek revenge in the future. Was there really a need to waste time in the Lost Garden? Therefore, there was a high probability that this disciple of the Peach Blossom Garden had something that they desperately wanted. That was why they joined forces. Who could it be? Eldest Senior Apprentice Brother was the first to rule them out. It wasn't that he looked down on Yen Ping and Long Feng, but that birds of a feather flocked together. If someone could join hands with them, just what sort of character could they be? To deal with Eldest Senior Apprentice Brother, that person was no different from sending himself to the kitchen. In the blink of an eye, he was cut down. Fine, he still looked down on them. In the past, Third Senior Apprentice Brother had managed the affairs of the Peach Blossom Garden, both large and small, and he had a considerable reputation in the St. Dao circle. In addition to his tyrannical bloodline, it wasn't too likely that he would have any designs on him. Of the three people, two of them had been eliminated. That left only Lei Xiaoyu. Although Chin Yu already had some inference that the Peach Blossom Garden Master was up to something, an inference was only an inference. There was no actual proof. If Lei Xiaoyu really was Lei Xiaoyu and her target today was her, then this girl would be in danger. These thoughts rapidly flashed through Qin Yu's mind. Then he made a decision. He would spare the two of them and follow them to take a look. After all, no matter who their target was, they were all people of the Peach Blossom Garden. Since Qin Yu knew, there was no reason for him to stand idly by. There wasn't much to say as they hurried along. The only thing that surprised Qin Yu was that the one responsible for leading the way was actually Long Feng. Moreover, as luck would have it, they managed to avoid several high-danger zones that the old turtle had sensed. Once or twice could be considered a coincidence, but this had already happened 5 or 6 times. If Qin Yu still believed this to be the case, he would have died long ago. Qin Yu couldn't help but quietly glance at this second-generation cultivator, who seemed mediocre and incompetent the moment they met. Was he pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger, or was there some other reason? As if sensing Qin Yu's gaze, Yanping smiled and said, "Junior apprentice brother Long Feng's talent is extraordinary, and he was born with a keen sense. Following him is absolutely the right choice." Long Feng coughed. He held his hands behind his back and looked up at the skies at a 45-degree angle, as if he were an expert that didn't care about fame or fortune. Qin Yu immediately cast a look of envy, surprise, and admiration. It was a look that left one satisfied. His acting skills seemed to have improved again. Could it be that deep in his bones he was a veteran actor? As Qin Yu's thoughts were in chaos, he suddenly frowned. The old turtle had told him that there were many cultivators gathered in front of them. It seemed they should be arriving soon. After Yan Ping sent out a signal, over a dozen cultivators appeared in front of them. Before the Lost Garden opened, Qin Yu's attention had been placed on the group of fierce people around his eldest senior apprentice brother. He made a mental note of them in case he encountered them after entering and was prepared ahead of time. "Yan Ping, Long Feng, who is this?" a cultivator asked with a frown. The other people's faces were also a little ugly. Everyone knew what they were doing today. If they brought along a new face and news of this were to spread out, would they still be able to live in the future? Yan Ping smiled and cupped his hands together. "Everyone, this junior apprentice brother Qin is a descendant of my Dragon Mountain saint. He is absolutely trustworthy." After he finished speaking, he revealed an apologetic expression. He turned to Qin Yu and said, "Junior apprentice brother Qin, please go to the side and wait a moment. Let me explain things to everyone so that we don't stir up any trouble." Qin Yu had a scared expression on his face. He nodded repeatedly and walked to the side. Yan Ping flicked his sleeves and laid down a spell. Then he turned to the crowd, and a sharp light exploded in his eyes. "In the end, you are all disciples of the Peach Blossom Garden. If you can avoid doing anything, then retreat as far away as possible. After all, with the Garden Master's supernatural powers, none of us can guarantee that we won't be discovered. This person is the insurance that I found for all of you. He was the one who did it, so the karma will be concentrated on him alone. Then, this person died in the Lost Garden. Even if the Yard Master has extraordinary abilities, I don't think you and I will be exposed." These words caused everyone's eyes to brighten. After a while, Yan Ping called Qin Yu over. The scene was warm and touching. Everyone looked at Qin Yu as if they were looking at a brother or sister. Towards this, Qin Yu revealed a look of surprise. Of course, it wasn't obvious, but it was just enough for Yan Ping to see. He faintly smiled and lowered his voice to say in Qin Yu's ear, "Junior apprentice, brother Qin, these fellow Taoists aren't familiar with you. In order to prevent you from being ostracized, I will take the liberty of making a promise to them. When we act, you will be responsible for the crucial step. Of course, junior apprentice brother Qin does not need to worry about your safety. Since we are going to act, we have already made all the necessary preparations. Moreover, after you do this, you will be able to obtain their trust and also obtain some benefits." Qin Yu hesitated. Yan Ping lightly said, "Junior apprentice brother Qin, you already know many things. If you refuse, it will be difficult for me." With a stick and a carrot in hand, This boy was playing with his hands quite smoothly. Qin Yu sneered inwardly. His expression wavered for a long time before he clenched his teeth and agreed. Yan Ping immediately laughed. Good. From now on, junior apprentice brother Qin is one of us. This was a secret signal that indicated Qin Yu's agreement. There was laughter all around. Firstly, they didn't need to personally act. This was definitely a good thing. Secondly, there was a new, ruthless person in the Peach Blossom Garden called Qin Yu. Today, they would have another person, surnamed Qin Kill, a disciple of the Peach Blossom Garden. Just thinking about it made them feel interested. Qin He, not bad. Amidst the laughter, Qin Yu also laughed, although he was a bit forced. But in his heart, he was laughing. No matter what this bunch of bastards said, with the old turtle around, he didn't miss a single word, giving up a crucial step to avoid being contaminated by karma. This was a good plan, but it also saved him a great deal of trouble. Laugh, laugh, laugh. Now that you've laughed enough, you can cry later. After all, in Qin Yu's opinion, if one's heart was filled with grief and fear, and yet they couldn't cry, that was a very inhumane thing to do. So, he was likely a relatively soft-hearted and kind-hearted person. After confirming that Qin Yu would act, everyone had a short discussion and then scattered in all directions. As if in order to prevent any accidents from occurring at the last moment, Cliff Ping and Dragon Peak didn't participate. Instead, they stayed together with Qin Yu, saying some comforting words and even promising him a flatbread that could make one drool. But in truth, they were monitoring him. Qin Yu pretended as if he had been seduced, and his heart was surging with excitement. As he practiced acting skills with the two of them, his eyes weren't idle either. He casually glanced around and was able to figure out what was going on. Cough, cough. Fine, that was a bit of a boast. In truth, after the old turtle saw through it, he told Qin Yu everything. These bastards were laying down an array formation, and it was an extremely vicious and horrifying array formation. They had actually borrowed the strength of the Lost Garden. If one really fell into their trap and fell into this array formation, it would be extremely dangerous. No wonder they dared to have ideas about the disciples of the Peach Blossom Garden. It was because they had this hidden card up their sleeves. But since they saw through it and had Qin Yu do it, humph humph, these bastards were quite cautious. They had made some specific arrangements in case Qin Yu didn't cooperate. But as he listened to the old turtle speak a few words, Qin Yu's heart calmed down. He looked at the smiling Yan Ping in front of him and thought that if Yan Ping knew that this card was destined to be useless, what sort of expression would he have? It would be quite amusing. There was no hurry. When the time came, he would naturally be able to enjoy it. The great array formation was finally completed. Everyone began to leave, using various methods to hide their auras. At this point, one could see just how fierce the background of the Saint Path was. Although Qin Yu didn't think much of these people. Cough, cough, that's right, he was a bit inflated. After he had killed a saint twice, he had also been chosen by the Garden Master to become a member of the 4.5-man squad. Their goal was to become the ruler. It would be a lie to say that his mentality hadn't changed. But the scene in front of him gave Qin Yu a warning. This was because the methods these bastards used to hide their auras were actually quite exquisite. If it weren't for the old turtle, he wouldn't have been able to discover a single one of them. Although they had borrowed the power of the array formation, this alone was enough to startle him. This was because, in other words, if today's plan had been to scheme against him, then without the old turtle reminding him, there was a 99% chance he would have been tricked. A group of people who really had a way to scheme against him and take his life couldn't be underestimated. Qin Yu's inflated ego quietly shattered. Yan Ping took out a jade slip and probed it with his divine sense. Then he took a deep breath and his eyes burst out with a sharp light as he looked straight at Qin Yu. They're here. With such a grand scene and so many people participating, just who was the target? Qin Yu looked up into the distance. Several breaths of time later, there was the sound of breaking air. The first thing that entered his ears were some vague conversations. But this was enough for Chinyu to conclude that his previous judgment had been wrong. The target was actually him. Shua! Shua! Two figures entered his field of vision. One of them had clothes as white as snow, without a speck of dust. His eyes were indifferent and clear. This was the Peach Garden's third senior apprentice brother, Bai Feng. At this time, he frowned and looked at the person beside him. "Is this the place you were talking about?" Standing beside him was another cultivator. His appearance was ordinary, but his eyes were bright. It was like he was the focal point of a person's gaze, making his entire face seem a bit livelier. He nodded solemnly. "Mr. Third, rest assured. If I didn't have full confidence, I wouldn't have dared to tell you." At this time, a faint fluctuation suddenly spread out from the front. This person revealed a happy expression. "Mr. Third, it's over there." As he spoke, his figure flickered and he threw himself over. A clump of straw mushrooms on the ground suddenly shattered. Smoke flashed and it turned into a running white rabbit. Its speed was astonishing, as if it were a bolt of white lightning. Although the person who attacked was fast, he was still much slower than the rabbit. "Mr. Third, hurry up and attack. It's running away." Bai Feng frowned. He felt that something was wrong with this place. But the Lost Garden had always been like this. Treasures and dangers coexisted together. This thing would definitely be helpful to junior apprentice Sister Peach Maiden's injuries. Thinking of this, he didn't hesitate any longer. He stepped forwards and pressed his hand down. Bang! The void rumbled and a giant hand appeared. It was like a demon god had attacked from the highest heavens. It instantly locked onto the aura of the fleeing white rabbit. It fiercely looked up, a look of panic on its face. But its red eyes were incomparably calm. Bai Feng's heart skipped a beat. His reaction was extremely fast, but just as he retreated, he forcefully stopped himself. This was because the array formation had moved. Chapter 1256. For an array formation to be praised as very fierce by the old turtle, its strength wasn't just for show. Bai Feng had a noble bloodline and similarly possessed keen intuition. He instantly determined his situation and his complexion darkened. He had been tricked. His junior apprentice sister, Peach Girl of the East Sea, had appeared in the Lost Garden again. It seemed that the Peach Garden had been far too peaceful these past years. So peaceful that many people had forgotten just what the Peach Garden was like in the past. This was also good. Today, he would use the blood of these people to awaken their forgotten memories. Recently, Bai Feng had been filled with sorrow, but he had no one to speak of it to. He could only endure it alone, so his mood was likely very poor. So after he determined that he had been tricked, he was both angry and excited. He finally had a chance to vent. As a descendant of a peak ancient bloodline, no matter how gentle and polite he appeared, he couldn't completely abandon the cruel and ruthless nature ingrained in his bones. But soon, Bai Feng's eyes turned blood red. He helplessly discovered that his opponent was this array formation. He wanted to kill someone, but couldn't even see a shadow. This was undoubtedly a sad matter. Moreover, what left Bai Feng increasingly uneasy was that, as time passed, the strength of this array formation grew stronger and stronger. This clearly wasn't normal. When he attacked before, he had already destroyed the array formation. There was no mistake about this. If the array formation wasn't weak and was instead growing stronger, there must be something strange about it. He couldn't stay here for long. Bai Feng lifted a hand and pressed forward. The temperature in the air began to rapidly fall. A pale white color appeared, covering the surrounding space. Kacha! Kacha! With a cracking sound, the frozen space began to break apart. Bai Feng took a step forwards. But the moment he entered, a dull explosion sounded out from the shattered space. Bai Feng was sent flying backwards, his face pale with shock and anger. There was a fist mark on his chest. His body was pitch black and contrasted with his white clothes, making him appear even more striking. If one looked at him, they would instinctively feel a chill rise in their hearts. In the next moment, a figure walked out from the shattered space. It was another Baifeng. His aura and appearance were completely the same. It was just that this Baifeng's robes were as black as the night, and his eyes were filled with cold, killing intent. A Ray spirit! Baifeng took a deep breath. His eyes became increasingly dignified. He certainly knew how difficult it was for an array formation to form an array spirit, not to mention that it was an array spirit that had completely replicated him. Today's encirclement was absolutely not simple. It seemed that someone had already decided to kill the disciples of the Peach Blossom Garden before the Lost Garden opened. At that moment, Baifeng felt somewhat regretful. If he had not insisted on staying with his eldest senior brother and Lei Xiaoyu, perhaps he would not have encountered such a situation. After all, it was likely that no one would dare to scheme against their first senior brother in the Lost Garden. However, this thought disappeared in a flash. At this point, regret was obviously useless. Looks like I have to risk my life today. With that thought in mind, Baifeng's eyes shone brightly, and a cry suddenly rang out. A giant phoenix appeared above his head, and it spread its wings. Every feather was as white as snow, sparkling and translucent, without the slightest impurity. Following the appearance of the phoenix, the temperature in the air plummeted at an alarming rate. White icicles condensed and slowly fell to the ground. Ka-cha! Ka-cha! Every piece of icicle that came into contact with the ground would release a terrifyingly low temperature, causing the ground to instantly freeze and form a layer of solid ice. The phoenix's eyes flashed like lightning as it stared at the black-clothed Baifeng. As if sensing something, its eyes filled with anger. This was an ancient peak life form that was once the ruler of this world. Although it had fallen into desolation, its dignity could not be offended. The black-clothed Baifeng that the array spirit had replicated had the same aura and strength. It had already violated the most important aspect of ancient life forms, the purity and nobility of one's bloodline. With another cry, the falling icicles froze. Then they held out, their speed so fast that it was difficult for the naked eye to follow them as they shot towards the black-clothed Baifeng. But as the icicles approached the black-clothed Baifeng, they hesitated and slowly came to a stop. The phoenix angrily screamed. Above the black-clothed Baifeng's head, a second phoenix appeared. Its feathers were pitch black, and they emitted an endless chill. Its eyes were cold and callous as it stared at the phoenix. They were similarly callous and filled with killing intent. They had even completed the replication of the ice phoenix bloodline. Baifeng's heart sank. He discovered that he had underestimated the other party's preparations. To accomplish this was astonishingly difficult, and a tremendous price had to be paid. It seemed that they were truly determined to keep him here. The phoenix could feel the thought of having a bloodline descendant. It angrily cried out and rushed forwards. The black phoenix spread its wings. In the next moment, it was like two bolts of lightning, one black and one white. The two of them collided together. Rumble, rumble. There was a terrifying explosion, and broken feathers rained down. With the black and white phoenixes as the center, a terrifyingly low temperature recklessly spread outwards. The world was thoroughly frozen. The black-clothed Baifeng stepped forwards. He lifted a hand and pressed down. What he used was the same method that Baifeng had used to tear through space. Ka-cha! Ka-cha! Faint sounds constantly came from all around him. This was the sound of space being frozen by the power of extreme cold. Humph! With a cold sneer, Baifeng lifted a hand and grasped forwards. The power of extreme cold gathered around his 5 fingers. He forcefully clenched his fist. An invisible power of cold manifested, forming a transparent ice bead. The phantom of a black phoenix appeared within. Strength endlessly poured into the ice bead. Not only did it not increase in size, but it shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. A bit of white frost appeared on the black-clothed Bai Feng's body. It gradually spread until it covered his eyebrows and hair, borrowing the strength of his opponent's attack to condense the phantom of a black phoenix, and then counterattack Bai Feng's body. This was a marvelous operation. It was clear from this that Bai Feng had extremely high attainments in the power of ice. But the reason this was called a copy was because the strength of both sides was exactly the same. There was no difference at all. The black-clothed Bai Feng lifted a hand and touched his eyebrows. The white frost covering his body instantly shattered and dissipated. He looked at Bai Feng, his voice calm and indifferent. "You are me, and I am you. How can these methods kill me?" Bai Feng shook his head. "I am indeed me, but you are only a spirit condensed from an array formation. How can you compare to the Ice Wind clan?" The black-clothed Bai Feng fell silent. He immediately said, "You are right. That is why I am unwilling." He stepped forwards, his eyes increasingly cold. "Since you and I are the same, then if I kill you, perhaps I can seize your mortal body and become a true member of the Ice Wind clan, forever existing in this world." Bai Feng's complexion changed. "Someone made you a promise?" The black-clothed Bai Feng nodded. With the situation having reached this point, there was no longer any need to hide anything. If he succeeded, he would replace the true Bai Feng. If he failed, he would disappear forever, as if he had never existed in this world. So, what they wanted to do wasn't just to kill him. They hoped that they could complete the possession and replace him with the Array Spirit. Strictly speaking, the Array Spirit and Bai Feng had the same aura, so it was impossible to distinguish them. In other words, at that time, there would be another malignant tumor in the peach garden that could explode at any time. Bai Feng paused. The corners of his lips curled up. "Although I don't know who is behind you, they have underestimated the Yard Master far too much. Even if you can succeed today, you will absolutely not be able to smoothly hide in the peach garden." Looking at the black-clothed Bai Feng opposite him, he continued, "You are a useless chess piece that could expose them hiding behind the scenes at any time. What do you think those great figures will do to protect themselves? I believe that killing you and pretending that nothing has happened is the best and safest choice. What do you think?" The black-clothed Bai Feng had a calm expression. "What you say is correct. So, if I can really replace you, I will try to escape." "Escape? In front of the Saint Tao, there are no secrets in the world. Where can you escape to?" "Then I will die. But at the very least, before I die, I can live a little longer and take a good look at this world with the identity of a living being." Bai Feng frowned. He wanted to use this method to strike at his opponent's will. But in the end he failed. After a brief silence, he coldly sneered, "Then let's see whether or not you have the ability." Pah! Between his fingers, the ice bead that had shrunk to half its original size shattered into countless pieces with a light sound. The black-clothed Bai Feng's body trembled. Cracks immediately appeared on his exposed skin. But that was all. He continued forwards. The cracks on his skin rapidly healed and vanished. "I just said that if these methods can't kill you, then they can't kill me either. But now, I am not alone, so the one to die will be you." Bai Feng's heart sank. What the Array Spirit replica in front of him said was the truth, even though he still hadn't seen the person who laid down the array today. However, it was obvious that they were hiding in the dark, eyeing him covetously. Perhaps he was waiting for the right moment to strike a fatal blow. Qin Yu inwardly shook his head. If White Phoenix had erupted with strength at the start of the battle, then there might have been a chance she could have broken through the blockade. But now, the array formation had already drawn in the energy of the Lost Garden, and the array spirit clone strength was nearly endless. Although by Feng they could seize the initiative and temporarily gain the upper hand. But even if they were to fight with attrition, they would eventually be unable to hold on. Not to mention, there were also the enemy cultivators who had set up the formation. Their preparations were clearly not limited to these. If he hadn't been there today, Bai Feng would have most likely died. This caused Qin Yu's heart to swell a little. He had just been shattered, but now he was even more vigilant and fearful. Sure enough, being relaxed and careless is bad. Is senior brother Bai Feng strong? Of course, he was very, very strong. The phoenix he summoned just now had a terrifyingly low temperature. To be honest, Qin Yu had only ever experienced such a thing in the Arctic Abyssal Sea. Let alone the God Realm experts. Even the original God Realm experts would be frozen to death if they weren't strong enough to resist the cold power. In the end, he was only listed by the Yardmaster as half a member of the 4.5-man team. It was not because he lacked strength or potential. The only problem was his background. The descendants of the ancient life forms that had been eliminated by the vast Yang world might have been born with great strength. But to this day, not a single one of them could become a ruler. This was a congenital deficiency, a choice made by the will of the world. Against such a strong third senior apprentice brother, a single mistake would spell his doom. Qin Yu certainly had to learn this lesson. While he was silently pondering and constantly warning himself, Yan Ping exchanged a glance with the others, coughed lightly, and said, "Junior brother Qin, it's time for you to make your move. You already know exactly what to do, so remember not to be nervous." When Qin Yu looked up and saw a bit of hesitation in his eyes, Yan Ping warmly smiled and nodded at him. The others also had an expression that said, "I'm very optimistic about you. Don't worry, there won't be any problems." As for what they were thinking in their hearts, these bastards were well aware of it. In fact, Qin Yu also knew. To send someone to die and still act so friendly, they really were a bunch of bastards. But being a bit of a bastard was also good. That way, when he killed them later, there wouldn't be any psychological burden. Qin Yu took a deep breath and clenched his teeth. He cupped his hands together and said, "Senior apprentice brothers, senior apprentice sisters, please remember the promise you made to me. I'm going now." He turned and walked away, his back filled with determination and sorrow. Space twisted for a moment before returning to tranquility. This boy had entered the array. He could be seen from the outside, but when he turned his head, he couldn't see the people present. Everyone's smiles immediately vanished, replaced by indifferent expressions. Their eyes seemed to be saying, "What promise?" Was there? Yan Ping looked at the silent figure in the crowd. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Brother Zhang, are you sure there won't be any problems?" This was indeed what everyone was most concerned about right now. Their eyes gathered on him. The cultivator, surnamed Zhang, had a light expression. "If this matter is exposed, I and my entire family will die a more miserable death than all of you. So, since I made a move, I will do everything in my power to ensure that nothing goes wrong." After a pause, as if to appease everyone, he continued to say, "Once this person enters the array, he won't be able to act recklessly. Even if he suddenly changes his mind, I am prepared to bury him along with Bai Feng." Everyone calmed down a little. They began to express that they believed in fellow Taoist Zhang's strength. Zhang Zhongshu lowered his head and didn't respond. Everyone was already accustomed to his attitude, so they didn't care. As for why they chose to believe him, it was because Bai Feng's Ice Phoenix clan bloodline was extremely useful in the Lost Garden, so they indeed coveted it. Moreover, this surnamed Zhang had an irreconcilable blood feud with Bai Feng. This wasn't a secret in the Holy Dao Circle. It was likely that before Bai Feng entered the Peach Garden, she had made a breakthrough and her bloodline had taken control of her, causing her to go berserk and commit endless slaughter. It was said that Zhang Zhongshu's wife and a pair of children were killed at that time. Their deaths were extremely miserable. After all, a descendant of an ice phoenix who had gone berserk couldn't be expected to be rational. The Holy Dao Circle was just a general term. The sages and their subordinates could all be considered members of this circle. But it didn't mean that one couldn't be a member of this circle without the support of a sage. The Zhang family was an exception. They didn't have a sage Dao and weren't a subordinate of any holy land, but they were recognized as absolutely qualified to occupy a place in the Holy Dao Circle. This was because if the Zhang family claimed to be second in the vast Yang world in terms of the Tao of array formations, no one would dare to stand out and claim supremacy. After the massacre, the Zhang family used their influence to launch an encirclement and almost forced Bai Feng into a desperate situation. It wasn't until the yard master intervened that the matter came to an end. After receiving the compensation from the peach garden, the Zhang family settled the matter. But this didn't represent Zhang Zhongshu's attitude. In fact, the peach garden didn't investigate further, even though there were several more incidents after that. However, his hatred for Bai Feng was something that practically everyone in the St. Tao circle knew about. Chapter 1257. Such as Zhang Zhongshu was naturally trustworthy. If it weren't so easy, who would dare to take the lead and besiege the disciples of Peach Garden? Over the years, the yard master had been explaining the profound in simple terms, with a sense of self-cultivation. However, as a member of the Divine Tao Circle, they naturally knew that when the Peach Garden was first built, the yard master, who had attained Tao as an alien, had slaughtered many talents to forge her current reputation. Because of fear, they trusted. Anyone who participated in today's matter was equally guilty. No one dared to reveal anything to the outside world. Otherwise, not only would they be finished, but their families would also be implicated. The people of Peach Garden had never been good people. This was also the reason why these cultivators dared to join forces. They were sure that everyone would rather die than keep the secret. When he heard the old turtle speak of this array formation, he was afraid, but in the end he had only heard it from the side. Now that he was inside, he could truly feel how terrifying this array formation was. In the abyss, he had grasped the art of observing the world. Although he couldn't see it clearly, he had still gained something from his ignorance. No matter how exquisite this array formation was, it couldn't compare with the world. Moreover, he was inside it, so he could see it clearly. But seeing it clearly didn't mean he could break it. Luckily, there was the old turtle. This fellow gave Qin Yu the impression that he was omnipotent. The old turtle vaguely sensed Qin Yu's thoughts and felt proud. "Boy, you finally opened your eyes and learned who a true divinity is." Cough. But in this case, if he were to simply destroy the formation, while he would still be able to achieve his goal, he still felt that it wasn't perfect enough. In particular, Qin Yu had just recognized who a true divinity was. He had to strike while the iron was hot and reinforce this impression in his heart. Then he could only think of a way to increase the difficulty. If there wasn't any difficulty, he had to create it. With these thoughts in mind, the old turtle coughed lightly, displaying the demeanor of an expert, and lightly said, "Master, to me, breaking this formation is as easy as turning over my hand. But to do so is too wasteful. Please listen to me briefly." Then he explained in the tone of a great master. The general summary was, if the array spirit could be subdued, it would be beneficial to Master's cultivation. Ever since Qin Yu learned of Peach Girl's situation from the Garden Master and became a member of the 4.5-person squad, although he appeared calm on the surface, he was actually very anxious. After all, that was a sovereign. He was said to be above the heavens, laughing proudly in the myriad of worlds. He was the known cultivation limit of the Haoying world, an existence that surpassed the Permitha true saint. Although he had walked the true divinity path, original divinity, Saint Tao, and other similar realms were meaningless to him. The difference in strength was still the same. Although Qin Yu had killed a saint twice, his real competence was at peak of original God realm at most. He could resist the saint path for a while, but he couldn't endure it for a long time. Of course, this was referring to Qin Yu's state before he entered the Lost Garden. He had absorbed the source of life and borrowed the trial field of the rules to cultivate. Although it hadn't been long, the speed at which he perceived the rules was far too terrifying, and his strength had clearly risen to a new level. But even so, he was still far from his goal, far enough to make him despair. Even if Qin Yu's heart was strong enough that he wouldn't suppress himself because of this, he still subconsciously desired to increase his strength. Since it was something that could aid his cultivation, he would naturally give it a try. He carefully listened to the old turtle speak. There was a bit of difficulty, and he would have to do it himself. But that didn't mean there was no chance of success. There was nothing to hesitate about. Let's do it. The old turtle smiled in satisfaction. As he expected, this Bratchin, you seem to be on steroids right now. He was filled with an urgent desire to cultivate. He had already noticed this when he was borrowing the source of life to cultivate. It had to be known that in a state of absorbing the source of life and also restraining one's own laziness, it wasn't easy at all. Once he succeeded this time, his unfathomable and omnipotent image as the shadow of the abyss would inevitably become more stable. He wouldn't need to fear that Qin Yu wouldn't lower his head and value him even more. Cough, cough. Why was he full of confidence? That's right, the difficulty of this matter had been a bit exaggerated. To be a living shadow, one also needed acting skills and strategies. What's wrong with using an appropriate method to obtain greater benefits without harming others? Qin Yu stopped. He took a deep breath and slowly reached out a hand. Outside the array formation, Zhang Zhongshi looked up. He stared at Qin Yu's back, surprise flashing in his eyes. This position was slightly off from what he had been told before, but this wasn't a problem. As long as he entered the approximate range, he could gather the strength of the array formation and stimulate the array spirit to go crazy, pulling White Phoenix down with him. To those present, killing Peach Garden White Phoenix was a matter that was placed at the forefront of their lives, so they were naturally cautious. Zhang Zhongshi's change in expression couldn't be hidden from them. All of them paled. "Fellow Taoist Zhang, how is it?" one of them asked. Zhang Zhongshi was silent for a moment. He shook his head. "It's fine." It really was fine. At least on the surface, besides the slight deviation in position and the fact that his attacks were a bit slow and jerky, everything was basically correct. As for the strength of the array formation, it had already begun to gather and fuse into the array spirit's body, constantly stimulating it until it went crazy. To destroy a peak array spirit, to an array formation cultivator, this was an extremely difficult matter to accept. But in Zhang Zhongshi's eyes, everything was worth it. Ever since his wife and son were killed and his family was forced to settle things, he had already died. All he had been alive these past years was just an empty shell. Killing White Phoenix and taking revenge for his wife and son was the only obsession that kept him alive to this day. As long as he could kill White Phoenix, let alone an array spirit, even if he had to pay with his life, what did it matter? White Phoenix felt the pressure. The strength that the array spirit's replica erupted with was becoming stronger and stronger. He was gradually falling into a disadvantage. And as time passed, White Phoenix could sense that the replica was becoming more and more violent. Gradually, it even gave off a feeling that it was about to go out of control. Taking a deep breath, White Phoenix's heart sank. He vaguely guessed the thoughts of the person who laid down the array formation, to use the array spirit as a sacrifice to drag him into hell. If White Phoenix could sense that something was wrong, then the array spirit had naturally sensed it long ago. But as White Phoenix had said before, he was ultimately only an array spirit, born from the condensation of the array formation. Even if he had an independent consciousness, he couldn't interfere with the operation of the array formation. This was different from what they had agreed on before. His master had lied to him. The array spirit was furious, and this anger accelerated the collapse of his consciousness. The blood-red color in White Phoenix's eyes became thicker and thicker. At this time, the voice of the old turtle sounded in the array spirit's ears. "Are you angry? Do you find it hard to accept? Now, I can give you a chance to continue living. Leave the shackles of the array formation and see the world with your own eyes. Then, do you accept?" The array spirit's thoughts fluctuated. "I accept." Old turtle. So fast, so direct. Didn't he need to think about it? It seemed this was easier than he had imagined. No, it was 10 times easier. This was troublesome. When he spoke to Qin Yu just now, In order to raise his own contribution and strengthen his own merits, he had said many things, such as this matter is extremely difficult, I don't have much confidence, master needs to think carefully, and so on. Well, the result was that the moment he turned his head it was completed. This was simply slapping him in the face. Cough. The old turtle hesitated. In truth, you can think about it some more. The array spirit said there is no need. You do. Array spirit. If it weren't for the fact that he was facing a life or death situation and that the owner of this voice was his only chance of survival, the array spirit would have already erupted. Are you playing with me? You are the one who took the initiative to strike up a conversation, and I have already agreed. So why are you making excuses? What are you doing? The old turtle continued to say, in short, you need to think about it. Don't ask why. Just persist a little longer and make it seem more real. I can help you exist for a little longer. His voice became serious. You should know that your body has flaws. At most 2 months, that is the limit I can give you. The array spirit readily agreed. To be able to see its problems and also easily communicate with it at this time, it absolutely had the qualifications to fulfill the promise it made before. Wasn't it just delaying things a little and making things a little more difficult? In truth, this matter was easy to understand and simple. It just so happened that the array spirit found Bai Feng very displeasing to the eye. It said that it was me, and Bai Feng was an array spirit. If it didn't know this better than it did, why would it need to remind it? Just because it didn't know how to speak, it had to beat it up. Then the array spirit became increasingly violent, and Bai Feng was beaten up. Although it wasn't too miserable, it still looked distressed on the surface. After condensing the strength of the array spirit was walking on the edge of self-detonation. For a short period of time, this was the same as erupting with its full strength. Of course, its strength was terrifying. Outside the array, for some unknown reason, Zhang Zhongsher felt a little restless. Amidst the excited and expectant gazes of everyone, he suddenly stepped forward and pressed his hand down. Zhang Zhongsher didn't wait any longer. He was going to activate his backup plan and sacrifice Qinyu as well. He was going to thoroughly drive the array spirit crazy and end Bai Feng's life. A tremor erupted from where his hand fell, instantly sweeping out. Then there was no then. The array formation was still there. Although the array spirit had gone crazy, it hadn't completely gone berserk. There was a problem. Zhang Zhongsher paled. The nearby cultivators weren't stupid. As they saw this, their hearts shrank and they nearly cursed out loud. Surname Zhang bastard, we trusted you so much in vain. Things have come to this point and you're actually having diarrhea at the critical moment? Damn it. It was no wonder he hadn't been able to take revenge for his wife and child, even after being hammered several times by the peach orchard these past years. But anger was anger. Right now, everyone was in the same boat. There was no need to say anything and just hurry up and think of a way to make up for it. But before everyone could suppress their anger and speak, Qinyu suddenly turned his head and smiled at them. This smile was light, but as it fell into everyone's eyes, it caused them to catch their breath. Because of their tumbling anger, their hearts suddenly skipped a beat. Their first thought was that this boy could see them. Then, not good, the problem was with him. Shua. Everyone's eyes instantly focused on Cliff Ping and Dragon Peak. A boy from an impoverished family was the best choice for a scapegoat? Motherfucker. You two bastards, when did you go blind? After sending Bai Feng flying away with a punch, the array spirit's momentum reached the limit and then it suddenly vanished from sight. That's right, it was like a shadow or a bubble. Like this, without any warning, it vanished from everyone's eyes. Then the array formation broke. The array spirit was condensed from the array formation and was its source of strength. But now, the array spirit that had gathered nearly all of the array formation's strength disappeared, instantly collapsing the array formation. Bai Feng was stunned. Then she saw the space in front of her distort and Qinyu step out. He cupped his hands together and said, "Fellow Taoist Bai Feng, I am old friends with Peach Blossom Garden, so I came here to save you." The garden master's disguise was indeed powerful, but at such a close distance it couldn't hide from Bai Feng, who was also a disciple of Peach Blossom Garden. Seeing her eyes widen, Qin Yu hurriedly blinked. Bai Feng swallowed the words that were at the tip of her tongue. She looked at Qin Yu in front of her, her heart filled with complex emotions. In truth, when she first heard that her junior apprentice sister Peach Maiden wanted to be together with him, she really wanted to tear Qin Yu to shreds. In order not to lose face or do something impulsive that she would regret, Bai Feng had chosen to go into seclusion. This could be considered a form of self-imprisonment. After leaving seclusion, she had followed her eldest senior apprentice brother and junior apprentice sister to the Lost Garden. But she never imagined that she would meet Qin Yu here and even have her life saved by him. Although the Array spirit had suddenly disappeared and the reason for it was still unknown, it was clear that all of this was related to Qin Yu. She hadn't even thought about what attitude she should have in the future when she faced Qin Yu, but now she owed him a life-saving debt. This was a sin. Bai Feng's thoughts raced, and she fell silent for a time. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. He coughed and said, "I have a deep relationship with the Peach Garden, so helping you is my duty. Mr. Bai Feng, there is no need to worry." In other words, he was saying that it was his duty to save her and that her senior apprentice brother didn't need to feel any pressure. But then again, to say such words at this time, cough, cough, no matter how you looked at it, it felt as if he were deliberately reminding her. Of course, Qin Yu wouldn't admit that this was what he was thinking. Bai Feng was his senior apprentice brother in the Peach Garden, and he was also tyrannically strong. If Bai Feng bore a grudge against him because of Peach Maiden, there would definitely be trouble. And most importantly, there wasn't any substantial relationship between him and Peach Maiden. He absolutely couldn't eat such a loss. Thus, when he schemed against Bai Feng, Qin Yu didn't feel any burden in his heart. Originally, it was because she didn't understand the truth and misunderstood him, so she naturally had to bear the consequences. And indeed, after hearing these words, Bai Feng took a deep breath. She cupped her hands together and bowed. The disciples of the Peach Garden clearly distinguish between gratitude and grudges. Your great graciousness today, Bai Feng will remember it. Qin Yu waved his hand, saying that he didn't need to. Inwardly, he relaxed. With today's words, he wouldn't need to worry about her in the future. Bai Feng was an extremely proud person. She wouldn't do anything that would slap her in the face. Without even needing to guess, she knew that her third senior apprentice brother was definitely in a bad mood right now. Since he had obtained what he wanted, he needed to hurry up and vent his anger. Qin Yu turned and pointed a finger. "Mr. Bai Feng, they are the ones who schemed against you." Then there was no need to say anything more. Bai Feng clenched her teeth and rushed forwards. One couldn't help but admit that the cultivators of the Holy Tao Circle had many methods. In particular, they were certain that if they couldn't kill Bai Feng today, no one would have a good ending. They couldn't escape. Even if they could escape today, would the Peach Garden just forget about it? They were simply too naive. Rather than being filled with fear in the future, or even being punished and forced to apologize to the Peach Garden on their own initiative, they might as well go all out today and perhaps kill Bai Feng. No matter how strong he was just one person. They might be weaker than him, but there were many of them. From the very start, the slaughter entered a white-hot state. As Qin Yu watched Bai Feng reveal his true form and transform into a giant ice phoenix, he swept through the crowd with disdain. With a single breath, he froze a person to death. With another breath, he killed another. Seeing this, Qin Yu couldn't help but praise his previous actions. This little trick was truly well played. Otherwise, he might have been frozen into a block of ice in the future. As Qin Yu was admiring White Phoenix's slaughter, some people's hateful gazes fell on him. It was obvious that the reason their perfect plan had been completely ruined and they had been forced to risk their lives was all because of this bastard. Regardless of whether or not he could kill Bai Feng, he had to die. Kill him. Tear him to pieces. Grind his bones to ashes. Their words were filled with hatred. As Qin Yu faced these people, he became increasingly certain that besides some hidden cards in his hand, there was still a great disparity in strength between him and senior apprentice, Brother Bai Feng. But, at the very least, protecting himself wasn't too difficult. Even if he didn't use the power of light and darkness and the power of space and time, his true divinity Tao was more than enough to deal with these red-eyed cultivators who wished they could swallow him alive. Of course, as he dealt with them, he also put on a perilous appearance that gave off a feeling that he would collapse at any moment. After all, if he didn't do this, how could he have hooked up these people? Today, whether it was Bai Feng or Qin Yu, neither planned on letting these people leave alive.